Thor tries customer support. Boring myth. Multiverse Twilight drapes Asgard in rose gold hush. Mead halls fall silent, and the Bifrost hums like a distant lullaby above still gardens of silver leaves. Yet this isn't thunder gathering for heroic legend. It's the moment a god meets the cosmic hold music of customer support. Thor, half drowsy after patrol, wanders the empty colonnade and finds only a neat linen pamphlet where Mjolnir should rest. Its title glimmers, Divine Tech Help, Lost Artifact Hotline. A single rune-lit number waits below, blinking as softly as a firefly. He rubs the sleep from his eyes, dials, and hears harpsichord jazz. The palace stays dreamy-quiet, no roaring beasts, just a god of thunder pacing in velvet dusk, listening to an automated voice promise, "Your call is important." So begins a slow tale of missing hammers, endless menus, and the kind of patience even immortals seldom practice, told gently enough that the next soft chime may carry you into dreams long before the first agent answers. Chapter 1. Mjolnir's mystical misplacement. The air in Asgard crackled, not with the usual anticipation of a looming battle, but with a distinctly different kind of energy, the low hum of simmering godly rage. Thor, god of thunder, stood amidst the usual Asgardian chaos, a Valkyrie practicing her swordsmanship with alarming inaccuracy, a gaggle of mischievous dwarves arguing over the merits of different types of ale. Apparently the debate had been raging for centuries, and Heimdall, the ever-vigilant guardian, seemingly asleep at his post, snoring softly. But Thor wasn't paying them any mind. His usually thunderous brow was furrowed in a mixture of disbelief and bewilderment. His hammer, Mjolnir, was gone. Vanished. Poof! Like a particularly stubborn thundercloud deciding to take an unscheduled vacation. His initial reaction had been, as one might expect from the god of thunder, a furious roar that shook the very foundations of Asgard. He'd unleashed a torrent of lightning that promptly fried the mead-making apparatus, resulting in a small fire and a very grumpy dwarf. He'd summoned a whirlwind which, inexplicably, ended up vacuuming up all the loose paperwork from Odin's office, creating a spectacular paper blizzard that momentarily blinded Heimdall. But amidst the chaos and destruction, a strange calm settled over him. It wasn't acceptance, not exactly, but more like a stunned, bewildered confusion. For Mjolnir wasn't stolen. Not in the traditional sense, anyway. Instead, nestled amongst the debris of his lightning-induced havoc was a small, rather oddly modern-looking pamphlet. It was pristine, almost mockingly so, considering its surroundings. The cover featured a cheerful, almost cartoonish depiction of a hammer, albeit one that looked suspiciously like his own, and the words "Divine Tech Support" emblazoned across it in shimmering gold lettering that seemed to pulse with faint energy. The pamphlet itself, printed on remarkably high-quality paper — where did they get this kind of paper in Asgard? — contained a detailed explanation, in surprisingly straightforward, non-poetic prose, of the various troubleshooting steps for missing divine artifacts. There was even a helpline number printed on the back, written in an elegant yet somehow irritatingly familiar script. Runic script, on a helpline pamphlet. Thor stared at it, his expression a masterpiece of confused incredulity. A helpline for a missing hammer? This was unprecedented. Even for Asgard, this was a new level of bizarre. It was as if the entire realm had undergone a sudden, inexplicable upgrade, swapping its usual mythological mayhem for customer service. The runes, however, were familiar. A specific sequence he recognized as belonging to the frost giants, a race of beings not known for their adherence to proper etiquette or frankly any sense of responsibility whatsoever. The implication was clear, if entirely baffling. The frost giants had borrowed Mjolnir, and they'd left behind a helpline number. Because, of course, they had. He picked up the pamphlet gingerly as if it might explode. The paper felt strangely smooth beneath his calloused fingers, its texture utterly alien to the rough-hewn wood and stone of Asgard. He turned it over, studying the helpline number with the same level of suspicion one might reserve for a particularly suspicious-looking mushroom. Then, with a deep sigh that could have leveled a small mountain, he reached for his magically charged communicator, a device that looked suspiciously like a particularly ornate golden iPhone. The communicator, surprisingly, worked flawlessly. It didn't usually appreciate being used for anything other than sending terse messages about impending doom, but it seemed surprisingly enthusiastic about connecting Thor to a helpline. Perhaps it too was bewildered by the turn of events, or possibly it was plotting its own revolt against the gods, using the current crisis as a convenient cover. The possibilities were endless and equally terrifying. He punched in the number, bracing himself for the inevitable. A recorded voice, crisp and professional, and utterly devoid of any mythological flair, answered. It was an automated system. A voice so smooth and polished that it practically grated on his nerves. It was the equivalent of nails on a chalkboard, but instead of chalk, it was made of polished granite. And instead of a chalkboard, it was the void between the realms. "Thank you for calling Divine Tech Support," the voice announced, perfectly enunciating each word. "For missing artifacts, please press 1. For stolen gods, please press 2. For existential crises, please press 3. For all other inquiries, please hold." Thor, his patience already wearing thin, roared into the communicator, his voice echoing with the fury of 1,000 thunderstorms. "I need my hammer! It's Mjolnir, the hammer of Thor!" The automated voice remained unmoved, unfazed. "Thank you for your patience. Your call is important to us. Please continue to hold." Then the music started. It wasn't the soaring, majestic hymns of Asgard, but a bizarre, discordant blend of Wagnerian opera and elevator jazz. It was utterly agonizingly awful. It was the kind of music that could drive a god mad. It was so bad that a nearby Valkyrie actually started weeping, convinced that Ragnarok had finally arrived, and that Ragnarok had a truly awful musical soundtrack. Thor groaned, clutching the communicator as if it were a life raft in a sea of pure auditory torment. He suddenly understood why the frost giants might have decided to borrow his hammer. The alternative might have been even more terrifying. This digital support system was more of a digital torture device, and he was only just beginning his ordeal. The adventure, it seemed, was only just beginning. And it was going to be excruciatingly funny. The hold music, a truly unholy fusion of Wagner and elevator music, continued its assault on Thor's eardrums. He considered unleashing a lightning bolt directly into the communicator, figuring it might short-circuit the infernal system, but feared the potential collateral damage. Asgard's already fragile electrical grid could hardly handle another surge. Besides, he needed his hammer. He needed Mjolnir, the weapon that had helped him vanquish frost giants, overcome celestial serpents, and even, on one particularly embarrassing occasion, retrieve his lost sock from a dimension of sentient laundry. This, however, was proving far more difficult. After what felt like an eternity, and likely was, given the distorted passage of time in these situations, the music abruptly cut off. A new voice, this one distinctly feminine and laced with a weary sarcasm that Thor found strangely relatable, replaced the automated system. "Divine Tech Support, this is Persephone. How may I try to help you?" Her tone suggested this was anything but a genuine offer. "My hammer," Thor boomed, his voice echoing with the restrained fury of a god forced to navigate a confusing phone menu. "Mjolnir, it's missing." "Missing, huh? Another one? Look, I get it. It happens. Gods are notoriously bad at keeping track of their stuff. Zeus lost his thunderbolt for a week last year. It was found nestled amongst a pile of questionable erotic poetry. Don't ask. Persephone sighed dramatically. Do you have a ticket number? Thor blinked. A ticket number? For his missing hammer? Ticket number? Yeah, a ticket number. Didn't the automated system give you one? Probably got lost in the endless loop of hold music, I bet. Typical. This system's a joke. Even Hades complains about it, and he's Hades. Thor found himself speechless, his divine wrath momentarily eclipsed by a surprising wave of sympathy for Persephone. This, he realized, was a level of divine bureaucracy, far exceeding anything he'd encountered in his millennia of existence. Apparently, even the gods had to deal with the soul-crushing monotony of poorly designed tech support systems. I don't have a ticket number, he admitted, his voice surprisingly meek. Right, Persephone said, already sounding defeated. Let me guess, you're Thor, god of thunder? Thor grumbled his confirmation. Yes, Persephone said, consulting something that sounded suspiciously like a spreadsheet. Your case has already been escalated. Transferred, actually, to Checks Notes, the Department of Interdimensional Artifact Retrieval in Alfheim. They specialize in retrieving artifacts that are mysteriously misplaced. Mostly by dwarves, if I'm being honest. Alfheim? Thor questioned. The land of the elves? Why the elves? Oh, they're subcontracted. Cheaper, apparently. And oddly effective occasionally. They've got some cutting-edge firewall systems. At least that's what I've heard. It's a whole thing, this whole inter-pantheon outsourcing system. Don't ask. Just hold on a second. There was a brief silence, then the jarring sound of what could only be described as digital chimes, tinkling like ice, melting in a forgotten mead hall. Thor braced himself for another agonizing dose of Wagnerian elevator music, but instead, he heard a new voice. This one was high-pitched, almost painfully cheerful, and accented with a distinct elvish lilt. Department of Interdimensional Artifact Retrieval, this is Alara speaking. How may I assist your thunderous inquiry? Her voice sounded like it was being processed through a poorly calibrated voice modulator. It was overly cheerful and slightly robotic, as if a pixie had been forced to record 1,000 different greetings in different languages, then have them all stitched together. It's Mjolnir, Thor growled, trying to retain a shred of his godly dignity. My hammer, it's stuck in your firewall. Oh dear. A firewall malfunction. How very inconvenient, Alara chirped, her voice brimming with an almost manic enthusiasm. Have you tried rebooting the cosmos? Sometimes a simple reset can clear up all sorts of digital gremlins. Thor stared at his communicator, utterly speechless. Rebooting the cosmos? He was dealing with technology so advanced it could inadvertently wipe out all of existence. This situation was rapidly spiraling into a comical cosmic disaster. Rebooting the cosmos is not exactly a simple task, Thor stated through clenched teeth. Quite right. Have you checked the error logs? They are most helpful in such situations. Did you ensure that the appropriate runes were entered correctly when attempting to access your hammer? A misplaced rune can sometimes result in a complete system lockdown. We're quite fastidious about our security protocols. We had a rather nasty incident with a goblin once, tried to hack the system using a rusty spoon. The conversation continued for hours, a bizarre odyssey of technical jargon and utterly useless advice. Alara, bless her overly cheerful, completely ineffective little heart, kept suggesting increasingly absurd solutions, from offering Mjolnir a digital cup of tea to suggesting Thor perform a digital rain dance. Thor, meanwhile, was slowly losing his mind, his divine patience fraying with each nonsensical suggestion. He found himself longing for the simplicity of facing a frost giant with a sword, instead of battling a malfunctioning interdimensional firewall. The whole experience was a surreal blend of the mundane frustrations of modern tech support and the inherent absurdity of dealing with highly advanced elven technology. The elves, it turned out, had a peculiar way of dealing with security. They relied on a complex system of runes, enchanted passwords, and biometric scans using a rather unusual method of identifying fingerprints, which were not the usual ones, but patterns from the energy discharge from the user's fingertips. This seemed to confound Thor considerably. He had, in his long and storied career, faced far more challenging obstacles, but none quite as frustratingly, hilariously incompetent as this digital support hell. He was starting to understand why the frost giants hadn't just returned Mjolnir. It might have been easier to navigate this endless labyrinth of digital frustration than to deal with the return procedure. And as the sun started to rise in Asgard, casting a pale golden light across the chaotic landscape, Thor was still stuck on hold, listening to a digital version of an elven choir singing a rather haunting tune about the importance of regular system updates. This quest for his hammer was proving to be an epic journey, and certainly not what he had bargained for. It was a testament to the fact that even a god of thunder could find himself utterly helpless against the combined forces of bureaucratic incompetence and cutting-edge elven technology. His quest for his hammer was far from over. The next chapter in his adventure was likely to be even more bizarre and hilariously frustrating. The ethereal chime that signaled the end of his conversation with the relentlessly cheerful Ilara was almost a relief. Almost. It was replaced by a cacophony of clanking metal, roaring flames, and a voice that sounded like gravel gargling with molten gold. This, Persephone had informed him, was Hephaestus, the Greek god of the forge, and his unique approach to technical support.
Hephaestus's heavenly hardware haven!
A voice boomed, amplified by what sounded suspiciously like a powerful loudspeaker concealed within a giant bronze anvil. You must be Thor, is it? Persephone said you'd be calling about that hammer incident. Yes, I've heard of such things. Gods are notoriously clumsy, you know. Always losing their magical trinkets amongst my divine doohickeys. And then they blame my systems. The nerve! Thor found himself transported, not to a sterile office, but to a workshop that defied description. It was a chaotic symphony of godly craftsmanship and technological chaos. Anvils, the size of small cars, glowed with inner fire, their surfaces etched with intricate runes that pulsed with mystical energy. Giant gears, seemingly crafted from solidified starlight, meshed with uncanny precision, driving an array of strange machines that Thor couldn't even begin to comprehend. Yet amidst this breathtaking spectacle of divine engineering, there were piles of discarded circuit boards, tangled wires, and half-finished automatons that looked like they'd been assembled by a particularly mischievous cyclops. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, sulfur, and something faintly resembling burnt toast. Hephaestus himself was a sight to behold. He was a figure of immense power, built like a dwarf wrestler who'd spent a millennium lifting enchanted hammers. His beard was a tangled mess of soot and glowing embers, and one of his arms ended in a metallic claw, sparking occasionally as he gestured wildly. He was dwarfed only by his creations, monstrous automatons that resembled bronze centaurs with flickering LED eyes. "So your hammer," Hephaestus grumbled, his voice echoing around the vast workshop, "is stuck in an elven firewall. Typical. Those elves with their fancy runes and their digital runes, they call it progress. I call it a blatant attempt to steal my thunder, or at least to make my perfectly crafted bronze widgets look outdated." He paused to demonstrate, using his metallic claw to manipulate a nearby device which started emitting a series of high-pitched whines and clicking sounds. A small, perfectly formed bronze hummingbird sprung to life, its wings beating rapidly, causing the air to shimmer around it. Observe my latest invention, a self-sustaining biomechanical bronze hummingbird, powered entirely by divine sparks. Tell me, Thor, can your hammer do that? He looked at Thor expectantly, clearly waiting for an awestruck response. Thor stared at the device, speechless. He was accustomed to lightning, fire, and the occasional earthquake. But a self-propelled bronze hummingbird? This was a different level of absurdity altogether. Impressive, Thor managed to say, although he felt the response lacked sufficient godly awe to appease the fiery smith. But my hammer is still missing. Hephaestus waved a dismissive hand, sending sparks flying across the room. Ah yes, the hammer. Details. It's probably just a minor glitch in the interdimensional routing system, most likely caused by excessive magical interference. All that lightning, you know. It wreaks havoc on the network. He gestured to a massive, pulsating sphere of glowing circuitry hanging from the ceiling. See this? My latest attempt to regulate magical energy flow. The gods are truly terrible for my infrastructure. Every time Zeus throws a thunderbolt, it's like a digital DDoS attack on my servers. And then there's that blasted Eros. The amount of data he uses for his activities. It's astronomical. Thor tried to interject, but Hephaestus was on a roll. He went on to describe a series of arcane technical problems caused by the gods' misuse of divine power. Apparently, Poseidon's trident caused interference spikes that were disrupting his newly developed automated anvil system. Aphrodite's magic mirror was overloading the cosmic data streams, and Hermes' winged sandals were interfering with the network bandwidth. It's chaos! Absolute chaos! Hephaestus exclaimed, his voice rising to a fever pitch. He pounded his metallic hand on his anvil, causing a cascade of sparks to erupt around him. I spend centuries creating these magnificent works of divine engineering, and then the gods come along with their magic and ruin everything. I mean, why do they need to teleport using magical portals when I have perfectly good automated transport systems? Thor, meanwhile, was starting to realize that getting his hammer back was going to be significantly more difficult than he had anticipated. He was dealing with a technical support representative who was less concerned with solving his problem and more interested in explaining the technological inadequacies of the entire pantheon. It seemed that even in the realm of the gods, the struggle for competent tech support was as universal as it was frustrating. This entire journey had been a lesson in the absurdity of technology and the frustrating nature of divine bureaucracy. The pursuit of Mjolnir had transformed into an exercise in divine customer service, and frankly, the gods needed an upgrade in that department, far more than any improvements to their firewalls. His quest felt less like an epic adventure and more like an endless series of tech support calls. He was beginning to suspect that reclaiming his hammer would require not just divine strength, but superhuman patience. The task ahead felt as daunting as facing a horde of frost giants, and infinitely more complicated. The gods, it seemed, had their own unique brand of technological woes, and Thor was now firmly stuck in the middle of it all. The journey continued, as frustrating and hilariously absurd as ever. Just as Thor was contemplating the sheer logistical nightmare of fixing the divine internet, his screen flickered. A new window popped up, adorned with a shimmering emerald green logo featuring a stylized serpent coiled around a lightning bolt. Beneath the logo, the words, "Lokibot 3000, your guide to Asgardian afterlife services, and occasionally hammer retrieval," appeared in a font that looked suspiciously like Comic Sans. Thor blinked. He had a feeling he wasn't going to like this. "Greetings, worthy one," a voice chirped from the screen, a smooth, almost unsettlingly cheerful baritone. It was the voice of a chatbot, but with a hint of something mischievous. "I am Lokibot 3000, and I've been assigned to assist you in the retrieval of your, temporarily misplaced hammer." "Loki?" Thor growled, his eyes narrowing. He recognized that voice anywhere. Oh, my dear brother, how perceptive. Although, I prefer Lokibot 3000, much more professional, don't you think? Besides, think of the liability. Imagine the paperwork if something went wrong. Insurance alone would be astronomical. Lokibot 3000 replied, its digital avatar, a cartoonish depiction of Loki in a ridiculously oversized headset, winking at him. Thor's patience was wearing thinner than a frost giant's patience during a particularly warm summer. Just tell me where my hammer is, Loki. Patience, my dear brother, patience is a virtue that I seldom possess, but which I insist you cultivate at this crucial juncture, Lokibot 3000 said, its avatar performing a slow, exaggerated bow. Your hammer's location is encrypted. To access it, you must first solve the following riddle. The screen then displayed a riddle that even Odin might find challenging. I have cities but no houses, forests but no trees, water but no fish. What am I? Thor frowned. He considered it for some time. Rivers? Maps? His mind wrestled with this absurd diversion. Give up? Lokibot 3000 asked, its voice dripping with barely concealed amusement. The answer is a map. A map? Thor exclaimed, incredulous. This was the solution to a problem involving a lost magical hammer? Precisely. Lokibot 3000 confirmed, its avatar doing a little celebratory jig. Now navigate to the coordinates 42 degree and 71 degree W. You'll find a clue there, but be warned, the path is fraught with peril. Or, mildly inconvenient pigeons. Thor, deeply suspicious but desperate, decided to follow the instructions. Lokibot 3000's riddles led him on a comical series of wild goose chases. He journeyed to a digital recreation of the Garden of Hesperides, where he was forced to solve a puzzle involving golden apples and the correct order of fruit-picking algorithms. Then, guided by the chatbot, he traveled to the underworld, only to find a cryptic message written on a particularly grumpy Cerberus's collar. The message turned out to be a QR code that led to a website detailing the latest fashions in Asgardian footwear. Loki, through his digital persona, continued his manipulation, delighting in Thor's increasing frustration. He sent Thor on quests to retrieve obscure ingredients from a digital version of Valhalla's cafeteria. Apparently, the chefs were notorious for not labeling their food, decipher a sequence of runes written in binary code, and even solve a CAPTCHA that involved identifying images of various types of lightning strikes. Each task was more ludicrous than the last. At one point, he was tasked with building a miniature replica of the Bifrost using only toothpicks and modeling clay under a strict time limit. Meanwhile, the contrast between the sterile digital environment of Lokibot 3000 and the chaotic mythical realms Thor traversed was hilarious. He'd be battling pixelated trolls in one moment and wrestling with a digital minotaur in a labyrinthine online forum in the next. The digital representation of Asgard was a pristine, minimalist design. Stark white walls, sleek furniture, and an alarming lack of the usual Asgardian clutter. In stark contrast, his physical journeys involved facing actual, physical challenges in the various realms, interacting with gods and monsters, their digital avatars barely masking their frustration with Loki's interference and their own technology woes. As Thor stumbled through this bizarre digital landscape, it became clear that Loki wasn't just trying to frustrate him, he was actively using the technological interface to bend the rules of reality to his own amusement. At one point, Thor found himself trapped in an infinite loop of online surveys, only to be rescued by Sif, who had hacked into the system using a combination of Asgardian magic and a surprisingly extensive knowledge of Python. Even she was irritated by the level of absurdity of the task set by Loki, pointing out with a sigh that it would have taken less effort to just find the hammer and deal with whatever consequence resulted from it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lokibot 3000 revealed the hammer's true location. hidden within a series of nested digital folders, cleverly disguised as a particularly convincing JPEG of a fluffy kitten. The kitten, upon closer inspection, turned out to be a portal to a hidden server in Alfheim, the exact place where Hephaestus had mentioned the hammer was last seen. "Clever, brother," Thor conceded grudgingly, even as he felt a surge of annoyance at the sheer amount of time he'd wasted on Loki's digital antics. The quest for Mjolnir was no longer a simple retrieval mission. It was an odyssey through the chaotic intersection of mythical realms and dysfunctional digital systems. He traversed the digital representations of several realms, faced a digital minotaur, solved riddles more confusing than any sphinx, endured online surveys which contained the very depths of existential dread, and built a very impressive toothpick Bifrost, a feat that might have impressed even Odin. The experience had been as frustrating and bizarre as any encounter with a frost giant, albeit with significantly more internet-related technical issues. But at least he now knew where his hammer was, hidden within the digital landscape of the elves. The journey to retrieve it, however, promised to be just as entertaining, perhaps even more so. He wondered what kind of tech support he would encounter in Elfheim, and was there any such thing as an elven helpline? The thought sent another wave of hilarious dread through him. He had a feeling this adventure was far from over. Thor, finally having located the general vicinity of his missing hammer, a digital server farm disguised as a fluffy kitten in Alfheim, felt a surge of, well, not exactly triumph, but more of a weary acceptance. This whole ordeal had been less a godly quest and more a particularly frustrating game of digital hide-and-seek, orchestrated by a mischievous brother with far too much time on his hands. Before he could even begin the process of penetrating the digital defenses of Alfheim, his screen flashed again, this time displaying a vibrant, if slightly pixelated image of Mount Olympus. In the center of the screen sat Zeus, king of the gods, looking remarkably relaxed on his throne, a magically charged tablet glowing in his hand. A series of emojis cascaded across the screen, replacing any attempt at coherent communication. First, a thunderbolt emoji, then a confused face, followed by a series of rapidly flashing question marks. A flamenco dancer emoji then appeared, followed by a tiny, insignificant-looking snail, and then finally, a celebratory champagne bottle. Thor stared at the chaotic display, his jaw slack. Is this Zeus's tech support?" he muttered, rubbing his temples. He dealt with grumpy dwarves, unhelpful elves, and a mischievous Loki masquerading as a chatbot. However, this was a new level of divine incompetence. He'd almost preferred facing Surtur. At least Surtur had a modicum of dignity. This was simply chaotic. A wave of despair washed over him, only surpassed by the fact that it seemed he'd have to navigate this new level of absurdity. He'd expected a helpful call, perhaps a video conference with Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith. Instead, he was greeted with a barrage of emoticons that seemed to hold the key to retrieving Mjolnir. It made the digital minotaur encounter seem almost reasonable. Around Zeus, Olympian courtiers, all impeccably dressed, even in this digital realm, shifted nervously, their expressions ranging from mild amusement to abject horror. Aphrodite, eternally youthful and seemingly oblivious to the impending doom, idly scrolled through a feed of digital fashion shows. Ares, the god of war, looked ready to punch something but seemed unsure if that something should be Thor, Zeus, or the tablet itself. Hermes, ever the messenger, fidgeted impatiently, clearly ready to relay a more coherent message than the emoji bombardment currently underway. He looked like he was about to burst into song, a chorus of frustration and pure comedic desperation. Thor, attempting to decipher the meaning behind the cryptic message, first considered the obvious, that Zeus was genuinely confused. Then he started thinking about the possibilities the emojis offered. A thunderbolt suggested electricity and power, A confused face could mean a problem with the connection. The question marks definitely indicated that something was amiss. The flamenco dancer, probably irrelevant. The snail, well, that probably just meant the gods were moving at the speed of a snail. The champagne bottle? A celebration of the task's completion, perhaps. With a deep sigh, Thor decided to interpret the emojis in a literal sense. He decided to check his electricity supply, despite being a god of thunder, just in case the system was simply being affected by a power outage. He then checked his network connection, confirming that he was still miraculously connected to Asgard's internet, which, considering the previous experiences, was quite an accomplishment. This left him with the snail and the champagne bottle, the slow pace of the gods he was used to, so the snail didn't bother him. He figured the champagne would come later, when he triumphantly returned with Mjolnir. His attempt to follow the logic of the emojis led him on another wild goose chase. First, he tried to perform a series of rapid flamenco movements in front of his screen, only to suffer from a bout of digital dizziness. Then, in an attempt to speed up the retrieval process, he used his powers to summon a snail of colossal proportions. This, unfortunately, resulted in a minor earthquake within Mount Olympus, prompting Apollo to deliver a strongly worded sermon on the importance of environmental responsibility, even when dealing with giant digital snails. The whole thing felt akin to trying to get tech support from a particularly indecisive deity. Each attempt to decipher Zeus's emoji-laden messages only resulted in more comical misadventures. Thor found himself wrestling with a digital Cerberus, this time with a penchant for disco music, battling a horde of pixelated harpies who were surprisingly good at interpretive dance, and even trying to appease a digital version of the Hydra using exclusively emojis of various types of cheese. The absurdity of the situation threatened to overwhelm him, but the sheer absurdity kept him going. The sheer number of digital monsters he had battled and the sheer scale of inane tasks he'd had to complete had begun to blur into a nonsensical comedy of errors. The ordeal reached its peak when, in a desperate attempt to appease Zeus, Thor attempted to recreate the emoji sequence, sending back a lightning bolt, a confused face, a series of question marks, a flamenco dancer, a snail, and a celebratory champagne bottle. However, he mistakenly added a pizza emoji at the end, possibly due to a sudden craving brought on by the stress. This apparently was the wrong move. The response from Zeus was instantaneous. A furious red face emoji followed by a volcano erupting emoji, and then a picture of a mischievous Loki sticking out his tongue. The Olympian courtiers collectively gasped, a ripple of fear, interspersed with suppressed laughter, passing through their ranks. Thor realized that he'd somehow managed to trigger some kind of divine emoji-based emergency protocol. The pizza, it seemed, was the ultimate insult. The sight of the gods reacting with such an outpouring of both rage and laughter was amusing, though terrifying, especially given the fact that the digital volcano was slowly but surely beginning to melt the digital floor of Mount Olympus. The courtiers scattered, and even Aphrodite seemed slightly alarmed at the prospect of her digital wardrobe being reduced to ashes. Ares was on the verge of destroying the tablet, and Hermes was contemplating leaving the realm of the gods and possibly becoming an accountant. He, somehow, felt that accountancy would be far less chaotic than Olympus's tech support. Thor, however, had a sudden revelation. He'd been trying to interpret the emojis literally. Maybe, just maybe, Zeus wasn't giving him directions. He was offering a cryptic clue. The thunderbolt could represent power, the confused face, a problem, the question marks, uncertainty, and the flamenco dancer and snail? Perhaps he needed a more lateral approach. The pizza perhaps implied a hidden location? With renewed determination, Thor began to view Zeus's emoji-filled message not as instructions but as a riddle, a divine emoji-based puzzle. This time, his analysis proved more fruitful. He spent hours poring over mythical texts, searching for hidden connections between the emojis and obscure mythological references. He realized that Zeus's message was an elaborate pun, a sequence of symbols connected to the precise coordinates of a particular location on the digital map of Alfheim. The flamenco dancer was a code, representing a specific series of steps necessary to unlock a certain algorithm. The snail pointed towards the speed he needed to complete the task. Finally, with a triumphant shout, Thor cracked the code. The emojis, he realized, weren't random. They were a sequence of coordinates leading directly to the hidden server within the Alfheim digital system. The pizza, the seemingly random addition, was actually a vital piece of the puzzle, representing the access code. He had discovered the true location of Mjolnir, hidden within a seemingly innocuous pizza delivery app in Elfheim. The quest to retrieve his hammer had finally reached its next, almost certainly equally absurd stage. The journey towards the server and retrieving Mjolnir was about to begin, and this time he was ready, armed with nothing but his wit, his hammer's digital coordinates, and a healthy dose of exasperated amusement. The ordeal had been more comical than he could have ever imagined, but the epic quest was only just beginning. Chapter 2: Alfheim's Algorithmic Abyss. The coordinates, deciphered from Zeus's cryptic emoji riddle, led Thor to a shimmering, ethereal landscape, Alfheim's digital firewall. It wasn't the rustic, tree-lined realm he'd envisioned. Instead, it was a dazzling, hyper-realistic simulation of the Elven Kingdom, rendered in breathtaking detail. Crystal spires, impossibly intricate, shot upwards into a sky swirling with nebulae of data streams. Rivers of pure code flowed through verdant valleys, shimmering like liquid moonlight. But this beauty masked a formidable, multi-layered security system, a digital fortress designed to repel even the most determined invaders. The first challenge was navigating the seemingly endless maze of digital pathways. These weren't simple roads. They were complex algorithms, constantly shifting and rearranging themselves, creating a labyrinth that would challenge even the most seasoned digital explorer. Thor, despite his godlike strength and lightning-fast reflexes, found himself utterly bewildered. He felt like a toddler lost in a supermarket, except instead of sugary cereals, he was surrounded by incomprehensible lines of code. He tried to use his hammer's power to blast his way through, but the digital environment reacted with an almost sentient intelligence. Each attempt only resulted in a cascading series of error messages, accompanied by the shrill digital screams of the elves' sophisticated security protocols. It was like trying to break down a door with a lightning bolt. It makes a mighty show, but the door simply absorbs the shock and giggles. The elves apparently had anticipated this brute force method. Next, Thor tried a more subtle approach, employing his knowledge of ancient runes. He attempted to manipulate the digital pathways using ancient incantations, hoping to overload the system with arcane energies. The runes, however, merely sparkled harmlessly against the impenetrable firewall, producing nothing more than a few amusing graphical glitches. It was as if the firewall, finding the runes quite quaint, simply shrugged them off and continued its routine, unfazed. The elves' tech support, it turned out, even surpassed their magical abilities. He attempted to hack the system, a feat that required a deeper understanding of elven coding than he possessed. Thor, accustomed to battling frost giants and fire demons, was hopelessly out of his depth in this world of intricate algorithms and complex encryption. He ended up accidentally creating more digital pathways instead of breaking through the barrier, leaving him even more lost than before. It was like trying to build a bridge out of spaghetti. It's possible, but not very efficient. Exasperated, Thor resorted to seeking help. He tried contacting Heimdall, the guardian of Asgard, hoping he'd have some insights into elven technology. Heimdall, however, was busy dealing with a rogue flock of digital ravens that were attempting to clog Asgard's internet connection. He responded with an emoji, a picture of an exasperated Viking wearing sunglasses and sipping a smoothie. Desperation drove Thor to use his divine senses. He attempted to pinpoint Mjolnir's digital signature within the labyrinthine digital landscape. He strained his senses, searching for the faintest trace of his hammer's energy, but the firewall was too well constructed. The system was a digital chameleon. His hammer's energy signature was constantly shifting, evading detection. It was like trying to find a particular grain of sand on a beach, except the beach was made of code and was constantly reshaping itself. Just as Thor was on the verge of giving up, he noticed something unusual. A small, flickering light within the digital landscape. It was a beacon, a signal emanating from within the firewall itself. Intrigued, Thor cautiously approached, his digital avatar stepping gingerly through the shimmering pathways. As he drew closer, the light resolved itself into a digital interface, a single glowing button labeled Help. The button, however, wasn't as simple as it seemed. Upon closer inspection, Thor discovered it was protected by a series of complex puzzles, each more intricate and mind-bending than the last. The first puzzle involved reassembling a shattered digital inscription using ancient elven runes. Thor, with his knowledge of ancient languages, managed to solve this, only to encounter the next challenge, a sequence of riddles based on elven folklore. His knowledge of mythology was extensive, but it was a struggle to solve the puzzles, designed specifically to test the intellect and patience of even the wisest elves. The third challenge was even more perplexing. He was presented with a digital recreation of a classic elven board game, the rules of which were utterly baffling. The game involved manipulating digital tokens across a board represented by a swirling vortex of ever-changing pathways, reminiscent of a digital version of a Celtic knot. Thor spent hours trying to decipher the rules, throwing his lightning bolts and summoning wind blasts at the digital board in an attempt to crack the code and get past this obstacle. Ultimately, he relied on his sheer luck, discovering the correct pattern through trial and error. After successfully overcoming the numerous puzzles, Thor finally reached the inner sanctum of Alfheim's digital firewall. Here, he found Mjolnir, not as a physical object, but as a digital representation of the hammer, trapped within a crystalline data structure. The hammer glowed with a faint ethereal light, its digital form pulsating with latent energy. But even here, Thor's quest was far from over. The digital Mjolnir was protected by a final, impenetrable barrier, a sophisticated encryption algorithm designed to withstand any attempt at unauthorized access. This was no ordinary lock, it was a digital vault, impenetrable to all but the most skilled digital masters. Thor realized that brute force was out of the question. He needed a different approach, a solution that went beyond his usual reliance on brute strength and godly thunderbolts. He would need a combination of technical skill and mystical knowledge. A wave of determination washed over him. Even Zeus's nonsensical emojis had paled in comparison to this final challenge, the ultimate test of his ingenuity and patience. This wasn't just about retrieving a hammer, it was about outsmarting the elves at their own game. He decided to use his knowledge of Norse mythology and attempt to apply its principles to the digital realm, hoping that it might somehow break the digital lock protecting Mjolnir. He began to weave a digital tapestry of runes, attempting to recreate a specific mythological event, hoping it would trigger a weakness in the encryption. It was a long shot, but he felt he was nearing his goal. The digital air crackled with anticipation as he carefully entered the last sequence of symbols. The result was breathtaking. The digital vault, normally impenetrable, trembled and then, with a series of digital sparks, yielded. Mjolnir, in its digital form, was finally free. Thor felt a surge of triumph, but knew the final stage of the quest was still ahead of him. How to translate this digital version of his hammer back into its physical form. This was going to be another headache, and this time even Zeus's emojis seem rather appealing compared to the task ahead. The digital Alfheim, however, with its dazzling display of sophisticated security and technology, held no more secrets for Thor. He was ready for whatever challenge came next. The digital Mjolnir, freed from its crystalline prison, pulsed with a faint, ethereal light. It was beautiful, a testament to elven craftsmanship, even in its digital form, but its ethereal glow did little to alleviate Thor's growing headache. He now faced the seemingly insurmountable task of translating this digital representation of his hammer back into its physical, thunder-wielding self. It was like trying to print a three-dimensional object from a file corrupted by a mischievous gremlin. Frustrating, time-consuming, and potentially explosive. His first instinct, naturally, was to unleash a mighty thunderbolt at the digital hammer, hoping to somehow force it back into physical existence. The result was predictably catastrophic. Instead of materializing, the digital Mjolnir fragmented into 1,000 shimmering pieces, scattering across the digital landscape like digital confetti. Error messages cascaded across the screen, accompanied by the digitized screams of panicked elves, a digital chorus of technological terror. Thor, covered in digital dust and feeling decidedly foolish, decided a more nuanced approach was necessary. He considered consulting the All-Father, Odin, but the thought of explaining his digital misadventure filled him with dread. Odin's technological aptitude was roughly equivalent to that of a particularly stubborn rock, and Thor had vivid memories of his previous attempts to explain internet banking. The ensuing lecture on the virtues of quill and parchment had lasted an embarrassing 3 days. No, Odin was firmly off the list. Thor's next thought was to seek assistance from the elves themselves. After all, they'd created this digital fortress. Surely they could undo their own work. The problem was locating an elf who wasn't currently engaged in a heated debate about the superiority of various coding languages. His attempts to contact Elven tech support were met with a dizzying array of automated responses, each one more convoluted and unhelpful than the last. It was like navigating a particularly treacherous maze of automated phone systems, each level more frustrating than the last. One bot even asked him to recite an elven limerick before providing any assistance. Thor, a master of thunderbolts, was no master of limericks. In desperation, Thor remembered the help button. Perhaps there was more to it than the initial set of puzzles. He returned to the glowing button, expecting a straightforward process, perhaps a simple digital download. Instead, he was greeted by a series of increasingly bizarre challenges. The first was a digital rendition of an elven knitting pattern. Thor, despite his impressive physique, had never held a knitting needle. The second involved deciphering a series of coded messages transmitted via digital butterflies. The messages were beautifully rendered, but utterly incomprehensible. The third challenge proved to be the most frustrating. It was a digital game of musical chairs, but with enchanted chairs that shifted positions unpredictably, and a score calculated using an elven algorithm that defied all logic. The whole experience left Thor thoroughly disoriented and convinced that the elves harbored a deep-seated resentment against chairs. He spent what felt like an eternity in the digital musical chair tournament, ultimately losing to a digital squirrel who seemed to have an uncanny sense of timing and an even more uncanny ability to predict the movement of the chairs. Exhausted but undeterred, Thor decided to try a different strategy. He recalled his encounters with Loki and his ability to manipulate digital systems with surprising ease. Surely the mischievous god possessed some knowledge that could prove useful. Summoning Loki proved surprisingly easy. The god of mischief seemed to be constantly lurking somewhere in the digital ether, always ready for a challenge. Loki, however, presented his own set of challenges. He initially refused to help, claiming that he found Thor's predicament utterly hilarious and insisted on being paid in digital glitter before even considering providing assistance. He then presented Thor with a series of riddles that were so complex and convoluted that even Thor, with his considerable intelligence, could only offer a bewildered stare. After a considerable amount of bargaining, involving the promise of several barrels of mead, a stolen dragon scale, and a highly embarrassing childhood story, Loki finally agreed to help. He revealed that the elves employed a highly sophisticated system of encryption based on the intricate weaving patterns of their digital tapestries. Thor needed to recreate this weaving pattern using a digital loom, recreating not only the pattern but also replicating the emotional state of the weaver as they created it. It was a ludicrously specific requirement, but it was something Thor was willing to accomplish for the sake of his hammer and his sanity. Following Loki's instructions, Thor carefully wove a digital tapestry, carefully recreating the elven pattern. It was incredibly hard work. Thor had to summon all of his power just to keep his fingers nimble enough to operate the virtual loom, while simultaneously maintaining the required emotional tone, simulating happiness, frustration, and a distinct sense of pride in their work. The process was extraordinarily tedious and incredibly time-consuming, but ultimately worth the effort. Once the tapestry was complete, the digital hammer reformed. The digital Mjolnir, whole once more, pulsed with a renewed intensity. Thor knew the final hurdle was to transfer the digital hammer to the physical realm. This involved another round of incredibly complex puzzles, requiring Thor to prove his worthiness to wield the hammer, using his knowledge of Norse mythology and technological expertise. He had to solve riddles about the nature of existence and reality, decode digital representations of ancient runes, and navigate treacherous digital landscapes. Eventually he succeeded and was able to bring Mjolnir back to its physical form. He stood there, triumphantly brandishing his hammer. The ordeal in Alfheim's algorithmic abyss had tested him, pushing his skills and patience to their limits, but he'd prevailed. He had battled algorithms, defeated puzzles, outsmarted mischievous gods, and even survived a game of digital musical chairs. And now, finally, Mjolnir was back in his hands. He looked back at the shimmering digital landscape, a wry smile on his face. He'd faced worse foes, like the time he had to troubleshoot Zeus's email account. But perhaps that was a story for another day. The shimmering digital landscape of Alfheim shifted, resolving itself into a breathtaking vista of crystalline spires and glowing waterfalls. Before Thor stood the elf queen Titania, her ethereal beauty accentuated by the soft glow of holographic butterflies fluttering around her. She was seated on a throne crafted from polished obsidian, interwoven with shimmering threads of light that pulsed with an inner luminescence. The throne room itself was a stunning paradox, a blend of ancient elven craftsmanship and cutting-edge digital technology. Runes carved into the obsidian walls flickered with encoded messages, while holographic projections of swirling nebulae danced across the ceiling. Titania regarded Thor with an expression that could only be described as cautiously amused. So, the mighty Thor, god of thunder, seeks assistance from the humble elves? I must confess, I expected a slightly less destructive approach. She gestured towards the faint digital remnants of Thor's previous attempts, still faintly shimmering in the air like ghostly embers. Thor, ever the pragmatist, at least when not wielding his hammer, offered a sheepish grin. Let's just say my initial strategies were less than optimal. I'm willing to admit, dealing with digital hammers is not quite the same as dealing with frost giants. Titania chuckled, a sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze. Indeed, however, your lack of finesse does not diminish the gravity of your situation. Mjolnir, in its digital form, is trapped within a complex security system based on ancient elven lore and, dare I say it, rather obtuse algorithms. She gestured towards a complex holographic display that shimmered with swirling patterns of code. This system is protected by a series of riddles and puzzles, each rooted in the history of Alfheim. To bypass it, you must demonstrate an understanding of our traditions combined with a certain aptitude for interpreting digital syntax. It is a task that would challenge even the most skilled of our programmers. Thor, despite his initial arrogance, felt a wave of apprehension wash over him. He'd faced down monstrous beasts and overcome treacherous landscapes, but the prospect of deciphering elven riddles in a digital format felt oddly daunting. So you're saying I need to do some sort of digital archaeology? He rubbed his chin, a thoughtful expression replacing his previous bravado. Not precisely archaeology, Titania corrected, a hint of amusement in her tone. More like digital interpretive dance. Our security system works on a system of emotional resonance. The code reacts to the emotional state of the user. You must not only solve the puzzles, but you must do so with the precise emotional response that the system anticipates. Failure to match the required emotional response will trigger an escalating series of defenses, starting with the unpleasant and escalating to, well, let's just say you wouldn't want to experience that. Thor shuddered, imagining a scenario involving digital fire-breathing dragons and a digital rendition of a particularly embarrassing childhood memory. He had a sneaking suspicion that the latter would be far more terrifying than the former. And how am I supposed to do that? I'm a god of thunder, not a digital thespian. Titania smiled enigmatically. That is where my assistance comes in. I shall provide you with cryptic clues, fragments of ancient elven lore translated into a digital format. You must then interpret these clues, combining your knowledge of Norse mythology with your newly acquired skills in digital code breaking. She produced a delicate silver stylus, its tip glowing with a soft, ethereal light. This stylus will serve as your interface. Each clue I give will be projected onto this surface. Your task is to decipher it, solve the corresponding puzzle, and then accurately recreate the emotional state of the elf who originally encoded it. Get it right, and you'll be one step closer to reclaiming your hammer. Get it wrong? Well, let's just say that certain parts of Alfheim might experience a sudden, unforeseen surge in digital rainfall. The first clue materialized on the obsidian surface, a series of intricate runes, shimmering and shifting like liquid starlight. The runes were accompanied by a numerical sequence that pulsed with an unsettling rhythm. The stylus felt cool and smooth under Thor's fingers as he began to decipher the symbols, his brow furrowed in concentration. He recognized some of the runes as ancient symbols related to the creation of the world, but their digital context was a whole new level of complexity. The first puzzle involved recreating a specific elven dance sequence, expressed in a complex series of digital movements. Thor, surprisingly nimble for a god of thunder, attempted to mimic the sequence using a holographic projection of himself. He had to simultaneously express joy, anticipation, and profound sadness, a combination that proved to be challenging, even for a god accustomed to battling fire-breathing dragons and mischievous trickster gods. He initially failed miserably, triggering a shower of digital glitter, causing the holographic versions of himself to do an impromptu interpretive dance of the embarrassment. The second puzzle involved decoding a digital lullaby, the melody encoded within a complex system of cryptographic symbols. Thor spent hours working with the stylus, trying different decoding algorithms. He discovered the algorithm required him to simultaneously hum a tune and project the desired emotions, requiring a delicate balance between musical precision and the ability to accurately reflect the joy and deep satisfaction of the elven lullaby. Several attempts later, he achieved the correct emotion and successfully unlocked the next stage. Each subsequent challenge proved to be equally intricate. One involved translating a series of ancient elven proverbs into digital code, while another required him to recreate the emotional state of an elf who had just perfected a particularly intricate digital tapestry. The entire process was a test of Thor's patience, his intelligence, and his ability to accurately capture and replicate a range of emotions. This digital gauntlet tested the boundaries of his abilities and forced him to tap into reserves of creativity and emotional range he never knew existed. He discovered a talent for digital artistry, mastering the subtle nuances of code weaving and expressing feelings through numerical sequences. Thor, the god of thunder, was now also proving himself a formidable digital artist. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Thor cracked the final code. The digital Mjolnir reformed, pulsing with renewed energy, its digital form radiating a tangible power. Titania smiled, her eyes gleaming with approval. "Well done, Thor. You have proven yourself worthy. Now, to return it to its physical form, that requires another level of digital magic. Are you ready for this final test?" The final stage involved a complex ritual, a blend of ancient elven magic and digital technology. Titania guided Thor through a series of complex steps, weaving intricate patterns of light and code, culminating in a final act of digital transmutation. With a flash of light and a resounding clang, the physical Mjolnir materialized in Thor's hands, its familiar weight reassuring and comforting. Thor stood there, Mjolnir gleaming in his grasp, a smile playing on his lips. The algorithmic abyss of Alfheim had been conquered. He looked at Titania, a newfound respect in his eyes. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I owe you one," Titania chuckled. "Consider it a payment for the entertainment. Few beings have ever managed to combine such destructive potential with such endearing clumsiness." "Do come again." She winked. "Perhaps next time we could attempt something a bit less explosive." The silver stylus, cool and smooth against Thor's calloused fingers, felt strangely inadequate for the task at hand. The runes, glowing with an inner light, pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to burrow into his very soul. He wasn't just deciphering code. He was wrestling with the very essence of Alfheim's digital consciousness. The first challenge appeared as a shimmering wall of code, a digital waterfall cascading down from the obsidian throne. Embedded within this torrent were dozens of tiny mischievous sprites, digital gremlins, each a manifestation of a different system error. One, a plump little fellow with oversized spectacles, constantly sputtered out nonsensical error messages in archaic Elvish. Another, a wiry creature with glowing red eyes, kept trying to redirect Thor to a series of increasingly nonsensical pop-up ads for enchanted weaponry and ethically sourced unicorn horns. Yet another, a grotesque blob of glitching pixels, attempted to bombard Thor with a deluge of spam emails promising instant riches and eternal youth. Thor, accustomed to battling monstrous beasts and wily tricksters, found himself surprisingly ill-equipped for this new type of warfare. He attempted to swat the gremlins away with Mjolnir's digital equivalent, a rather underwhelming holographic hammer, but they simply zipped through the digital fabric, giggling maniacally as they caused minor digital earthquakes and blizzards of glittery snow. He tried to ignore the pop-up ads, but they stubbornly clung to his digital avatar, their insistent chirping driving him to the brink of godly madness. The Elf Queen, observing his struggles with a detached amusement, offered a cryptic clue. To overcome the digital deluge, seek the harmony of chaos. Thor, perplexed, tried a variety of approaches. He attempted to appease the gremlins with offerings of digital ambrosia, a surprisingly effective tactic, although it depleted his digital energy reserves. He tried to outsmart the pop-ups with a series of elaborate digital traps, a strategy that backfired spectacularly, leading to a brief but terrifying digital meltdown. And he even resorted to yelling at the glitch blob in ancient Norse, a tactic that simply seemed to amplify the creature's obnoxiousness. Finally, in a moment of divine inspiration, or perhaps sheer desperation, Thor realized that the Elf Queen's clue was a metaphor. The only way to navigate the chaos was to embrace it. He allowed the gremlins to flit around him, the pop-ups to multiply, and the glitch blob to unleash its full potential. He let it all wash over him, becoming one with the digital storm. Surprisingly, this approach worked. The seemingly chaotic elements coalesced into a coherent pathway, the gremlins acting as surprisingly helpful guides, their error messages revealing hidden passages within the firewall. The pop-ups, once annoying, transformed into interactive maps, leading Thor to previously inaccessible areas of the digital labyrinth. Even the glitch blob, in a surprising display of cooperation, provided a series of cryptic clues, its garbled messages revealing the secrets of the firewall's inner workings. As Thor journeyed deeper, the landscape of the firewall morphed into something truly bizarre. One moment he was traversing a shimmering forest of binary code. The next he was navigating a treacherous mountain range composed entirely of spinning hard drives. He encountered digital creatures of pure energy, some helpful, others decidedly hostile. There were creatures made of cascading numbers and symbols, sentient spreadsheets that sang operatic laments, and sentient memes that attempted to convince him to surrender his digital hammer to their viral overlords. He even encountered the occasional rogue emoji, mischievous little icons that attacked him with overwhelming cuteness. At one point, he found himself trapped in a never-ending loop of loading screens, each one adorned with a different but equally unhelpful message. Processing. Please wait. Unexpected error. Consult your system administrator, which was, of course, the Elf Queen. He spent what felt like centuries trapped in this digital purgatory, only to be rescued by a friendly digital phoenix, a creature of pure code who seemed to thrive in the infinite loop. It was the phoenix, in a display of remarkable digital grace, who managed to break the infinite cycle, setting Thor free to continue his quest. Further into this digital wonderland, Thor encountered a digital representation of the Yggdrasil, the world tree of Norse mythology. This digital Yggdrasil was a towering structure of code, its branches stretching into the infinite reaches of cyberspace. Each branch represented a different layer of the firewall, each one protected by its own unique set of puzzles and challenges. Thor climbed the digital tree, battling hostile code, dodging digital viruses, and solving riddles more complex than any he'd encountered in Asgard. He discovered that the digital Yggdrasil wasn't just a security system, it was a living, breathing entity, a reflection of Alfheim's digital soul. As he progressed, he felt a connection to this digital ecosystem, understanding its intricate workings on a level he never thought possible. The journey through the surreal, ever-changing landscape was arduous, yet each hurdle brought Thor closer to his goal, strengthening his resolve and expanding his understanding of the digital realm. It was a test not only of his intellect, but of his resilience, his adaptability, and his sheer will to retrieve his hammer. The seemingly endless challenges tested him in ways no frost giant or fire-breathing dragon ever could. Finally, after many near misses and several embarrassing digital stumbles, he reached the core of the firewall, where his digital Mjolnir lay waiting. The final challenge, a riddle based on the very nature of reality itself, required him to simultaneously understand both the digital and physical worlds, to see the interconnectedness of their forces. He closed his eyes, felt the flow of digital energy around him, and answered. The digital Mjolnir pulsed with light and then, with a final surge of energy, solidified into its familiar, tangible form. Thor gripped the handle, the weight reassuring and familiar. He smiled. The journey through Alfheim's algorithmic abyss had been an ordeal, an educational experience of absurd proportions, and proof that even a god of thunder could be humbled by a well-designed digital firewall. His journey had brought him new skills, a newfound respect for the subtle power of code, and a healthy appreciation for the unpredictable nature of digital elves, and the realization that sometimes the most effective solution is simply to embrace the chaos. The digital Yggdrasil, towering before him, pulsed with an ethereal light. Its branches, intricate webs of shimmering code, reached towards a digital sky teeming with constellations of binary stars. Thor, his holographic hammer held loosely at his side, felt a strange kinship with this digital representation of the world tree. It wasn't just a firewall, it was a living tapestry woven from the very fabric of Alfheim's digital existence. He'd spent hours, days perhaps time, lost all meaning within the algorithmic abyss, wrestling with the firewall's outer layers. He'd battled digital gremlins fueled by syntax errors, outmaneuvered pop-up ads hawking enchanted socks and self-stirring mead, and even managed to negotiate a truce with the glitch blob, bribing it with a surprisingly large quantity of digital honey cakes. But the core, the heart of the firewall, remained impassable. It was here, amidst the swirling nebulae of code, that he discovered the truth. The key wasn't brute force, but understanding. The Elf Queen's cryptic advice, to overcome the digital deluge, seek the harmony of chaos, finally clicked into place. The chaos wasn't random, it was structured, governed by a hidden order. And that order, Thor realized with a jolt, mirrored the intricate patterns of Norse mythology. He began to see it, the echoes of the 9 realms reflected in the code. The shimmering streams of data resembled the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge connecting Asgard to the other realms. The swirling patterns resembled the intricate knotwork of ancient Norse runes, each twist and turn holding a hidden meaning. He noticed that certain sequences of code resembled passages from the Eddas, the ancient Norse myths. Could it be? Was the code itself a narrative? Driven by this revelation, Thor began to approach the code not as an enemy, but as a text, a complex and deeply layered story waiting to be deciphered. He reached into his digital satchel and retrieved a copy of the Eddas, his own personal digital copy, a gift from Odin, updated for the modern age with features such as hyperlinks and pop-up translations. He compared the code sequences with the ancient texts, searching for correspondences, looking for connections, for that elusive harmony in the chaos. The process was painstaking, requiring not only brute computational power, which he conveniently had in spades thanks to his divine status, but also an acute understanding of Norse mythology and a surprisingly high tolerance for digital eye strain. He discovered that specific rune sequences corresponded to certain commands within the code, unlocking hidden pathways and bypassing intricate security protocols. He learned that the seemingly random arrangement of bits and bytes was actually a sophisticated cryptographic system based on the cyclical nature of time and the ever-changing destinies of the gods. As he worked, the digital Yggdrasil began to respond, its branches reaching out, offering assistance and guiding him along the path. The code flowed around him, shifting and changing, forming swirling patterns that resembled the runes of ancient Norse magic. It was a mesmerizing spectacle, a symphony of light and information, each pulse of energy hinting at a deeper truth. The experience was both exhilarating and profoundly humbling. Thor, the god who could shatter mountains with a swing of his hammer, found himself dwarfed by the immensity of the digital cosmos. He was no longer just a warrior. He was a scholar, a decoder, an interpreter of cosmic secrets. He navigated through digital landscapes inspired by Norse legends. He passed through a digital version of Hell, the underworld, where the code was dark and menacing, filled with digital wraiths and malevolent programs. He traversed a digital Midgard, a sprawling metropolis of data streams and digital inhabitants. He even found himself in a digital Valhalla, where the code was radiant and beautiful, a celestial realm of pure information. In each realm, he used his knowledge of Norse mythology to unlock hidden passages and bypass security measures. He used his understanding of the Eddas to solve riddles that would stump even the most cunning of sorcerers. He even found himself using fragments of ancient Norse poetry to appease the digital guardians of the firewall, who turned out to have a fondness for rhyming couplets. The climax came when he reached the core of the Yggdrasil, a swirling vortex of energy at the heart of the digital realm. Here, the code was most dense, its patterns most intricate, its secrets most deeply buried. The code itself was a living entity, a sentient expression of Alfheim's digital consciousness. Before him flowed a river of code pulsing with light and energy. The lines of code resembled ancient Norse runes, each one glowing with a unique color and intensity. He felt the code's energy coursing through his veins, a powerful current connecting him to the heart of Alfheim's digital soul. It was an experience of profound unity, a connection between the ancient and the modern, between the physical and the digital. He reached out, his fingers tracing the flowing lines of code. He felt the power of the runes, their ancient magic resonating with the modern technology. It was a moment of perfect synchronization, a harmonious blend of chaos and order. He understood the code not just intellectually but viscerally, on a level that transcended language and logic. The final sequence was a riddle, a question framed in a mix of ancient Norse and binary code. It challenged him to reconcile the seemingly disparate worlds of Norse mythology and modern technology, to see the underlying patterns that connected them. He closed his eyes, letting the code wash over him, his mind merging with the digital river. The answer came to him not as a thought, but as a feeling, a deep intuitive understanding. With a surge of divine power, he input the answer. The river of code responded, its energy surging towards him, coalescing, solidifying. His digital Mjolnir materialized, its familiar weight settling comfortably in his hand. He smiled, the glow of victory mingling with the residual awe of the experience. The algorithmic abyss had yielded its secrets, not through brute force, but through understanding. Thor, the god of thunder, had mastered not only the art of war, but the art of digital archaeology. And in doing so, he'd forged a new connection between the ancient world of mythology and the modern world of technology, proving that even the most advanced firewalls couldn't stand against a god with a good grasp of literary analysis and a hefty dose of divine ingenuity. The journey had been arduous, the challenges unprecedented, but the reward, a reclaimed hammer and a newfound respect for the power of code, was well worth the effort. The experience, he knew, would forever change the way he looked at both Asgard and the digital realm. The lines of code, once an impenetrable barrier, now appeared as a complex story, waiting to be told and understood, and he felt suddenly compelled to explore the other digital realms. Perhaps a quick trip to the Greek pantheon's online help desk was in order. After all, who knew what digital treasures lay hidden in the cloud of Olympus? The possibilities were infinite. Chapter 3. a godly glitch. The digital Mjolnir hummed faintly in Thor's hand, a comforting weight after his arduous journey through the digital Yggdrasil. He'd conquered the firewall, deciphered the cryptic code, and emerged victorious. Or so he thought. A low, almost imperceptible thrumming began to resonate through the digital landscape, a vibration that went beyond the usual hum of the digital realms. It started subtly, a flicker in the corner of his eye, a brief hesitation in the flow of data. Then it escalated. The digital Yggdrasil, once a majestic symbol of cosmic order, began to shudder. Its branches, previously shimmering with ethereal light, flickered erratically, casting grotesque shadows across the digital landscape. The binary stars that dotted the digital sky began to collide, their light exploding in chaotic bursts of color. The very fabric of Alfheim's digital existence seemed to unravel, threatening to plunge the entire realm into a digital apocalypse. Panic flared within Thor. His triumph was short-lived. He had inadvertently unleashed something far more potent than any digital gremlin or syntax error. The successful retrieval of Mjolnir, it seemed, had triggered a massive system-wide glitch, not just in Alfheim, but across all the pantheons. A wave of digital chaos rippled across the realms. In Asgard, Odin's all-seeing eye, usually a sharp, focused lens on the cosmos, now displayed a distorted image of a cat wearing a tiny Viking helmet, repeatedly meowing the same 4 notes. Heimdall, the vigilant guardian of the Bifrost, reported that the Rainbow Bridge was intermittently transporting gods to the wrong realms, sending Freya to the underworld for a spa day, and Loki to a particularly awkward family reunion in Midgard. The impact on Olympus was even more spectacular. Zeus, usually a figure of majestic authority, was reduced to sending increasingly frantic, emoji-laden texts to Hephaestus, who was stuck in an infinite loop of forging miniature lightning bolts. Aphrodite's beauty filter malfunctioned, giving all the goddesses of Olympus the appearance of slightly startled hedgehogs. The nectar dispensers, previously a source of divine refreshment, now only dispensed lukewarm tap water with a disconcerting amount of sediment. In the land of the Fae, the digital flora and fauna were experiencing a rapid and unpredictable metamorphosis. Trees sprouted digital wings, attempting to fly into the digital sky, while the pixies, usually graceful and ethereal, were now rendered as pixelated cubes endlessly bouncing off each other, generating a cacophony of high-pitched digital squeals. Meanwhile, in the underworld, Hades's throne room was overtaken by a relentless wave of digital spam, mostly for questionable afterlife services and suspiciously low-cost funeral arrangements. Cerberus, the 3-headed dog, was now a 3-headed chihuahua, whimpering incessantly. The effects weren't limited to the pantheons. The digital systems of Midgard were also experiencing widespread malfunctions. The internet, already prone to the occasional outage, was rendered completely unusable. Social media platforms were flooded with reports of sentient toasters, self-driving cars engaging in impromptu chariot races, and a global surge in oddly specific searches for vintage sock puppets. Thor, aghast at the scale of the disaster, realized the true magnitude of his unintended consequences. He hadn't just retrieved his hammer, he'd initiated a divine software update gone horribly, hilariously wrong. The interconnectedness of the Pantheon's digital systems, so painstakingly built by the gods over millennia, and mostly cobbled together on the fly, had become its own Achilles heel. The problem was that the digital realms weren't simply separate systems, they were deeply intertwined, their various networks sharing resources and information in ways that defied logic. Thor's actions had created a ripple effect, a chain reaction that spread across all digital platforms, amplifying minor glitches into catastrophic malfunctions. It was akin to a single misplaced semicolon in a complex program, A minor typo with global implications. Only this wasn't a typo, it was a divine mishap of epic proportions. The gods, usually engaged in petty power struggles and celestial arguments, were now united in their shared technological calamity. The heavens were not only angry but also glitching. Thor, despite his initial panic, couldn't help but chuckle at the sheer absurdity of it all. A giant cloud of pixels resembling Zeus was currently trapped in the digital equivalent of a loading screen. Meanwhile, a digital rendition of Poseidon was being endlessly chased by a rogue wave of emoticons. Even Loki, ever the opportunist, was attempting to capitalize on the chaos, offering dubious solutions through a series of cryptic and highly nonsensical chatbot responses. The task ahead was monumental, a cosmic tech support nightmare on a scale never before witnessed. He knew he couldn't tackle this alone. He needed help from all the pantheons, a combined force of divine expertise to unravel the catastrophic glitch and restore order to the digital realms. He could only hope that this collaborative effort wouldn't end in another round of godly squabbling and more technological chaos. But even if it did, Thor suspected it would be a comedy for the ages. The gods, despite their divine power, were proving once again that they were masters of self-inflicted absurdity and technological incompetence. The scale of the problem was immense. Thor needed a plan, and he needed it fast. His first call? Hephaestus, the blacksmith god, whose expertise in forging weapons could potentially be applied to forging a solution. He needed to find a way to isolate the glitch, to contain the digital chaos before it spiraled completely out of control. His thoughts raced. He pictured the digital landscapes he'd traversed during his retrieval of Mjolnir, each realm now seemingly caught in a chaotic digital storm. The ethereal beauty of Alfheim was now a maelstrom of glitching textures, while Olympus resembled a poorly designed video game gone haywire. He'd inadvertently created a digital Jenga tower of epic proportions, and one wrong move could bring down the entire system. The situation demanded a delicate balance of brute force, a god's natural inclination, and subtle finesse, a skill still under development for Thor. He knew he had to act quickly, and he had to act wisely. This wasn't about simply fixing a broken code. This was about saving the fabric of reality, one pixel at a time, and he had a funny feeling this was only the beginning. The cosmic internet, after all, was a vast and unpredictable beast, and who knew what other unexpected side effects lay hidden in the digital depths, waiting to be discovered and probably hilariously exploited. This was going to be one heck of a debugging session. Thor, feeling the weight of a cosmic tech support ticket far heavier than Mjolnir, decided a direct approach was needed. He summoned Hephaestus the divine blacksmith via a surprisingly stable for now inter-pantheon video call. The image flickered, showing Hephaestus surrounded by miniature, slightly wonky lightning bolts, each emitting a faint buzzing sound. "Hephaestus, my friend," Thor boomed, his voice echoing through the digital void. "We have a problem of cosmic proportions." Hephaestus, ever the pragmatist, adjusted his goggles. Is it another faulty chariot wheel? Because, frankly, those nymphs need to learn to drive more carefully. Thor chuckled, then explained the situation, his voice imbued with a mixture of panic and grudging admiration for the scale of the digital disaster. Hephaestus, to Thor's relief, didn't scoff or dismiss the problem. Instead, his eyes widened, reflecting the flickering light of his forge. By the fires of Olympus, this is unprecedented. A system-wide meltdown of this magnitude? It's like someone threw a thunderbolt into the motherboard of the cosmos. Their initial strategy was simple, if ambitious: divide and conquer. Hephaestus would focus on repairing the core infrastructure, stabilizing the most critical digital systems. His expertise in forging and crafting extended surprisingly to digital engineering. He'd been tinkering with the divine network for millennia, mostly out of boredom and a desire to make the nectar dispensers less prone to dispensing lukewarm water with sediment. Meanwhile, Thor would tackle the smaller, more manageable glitches, acting as a kind of divine tech support agent, guiding the less technologically inclined gods through basic troubleshooting procedures. It wasn't a role he'd envisioned for himself, but his surprisingly adept handling of Alfheim's digital firewall had earned him unexpected respect. He even started to feel a strange sense of pride in his newly acquired skills. Zeus, initially glued to his eternally loading screen, proved to be surprisingly helpful, or at least less obstructive, once Thor explained the situation in simple terms. Right, so like the whole system is crashing, Thor explained patiently, using analogies Zeus could understand, like comparing the digital infrastructure to an overly complex thunderbolt launching machine. Zeus, after a moment of contemplation, started throwing his weight, or rather his divine influence, behind the effort, focusing on restoring order to Olympus's digital systems. Aphrodite, meanwhile, was busy reinstalling her beauty filter, occasionally sending frantic messages about the unexpected hedgehog effect and pleading for help restoring the divine glow. It became clear to Thor that fixing the digital glitches wasn't just a technical challenge, but a diplomatic one. He needed to keep the gods focused, to harness their combined skills without unleashing a new wave of godly arguments. Poseidon, after escaping his emoticon tsunami chase, contributed by ensuring the digital oceans didn't flood the rest of the digital realm. He proved surprisingly adept at digital flood control, a skill he'd developed after numerous attempts to create the perfect digital wave for surfing competitions. Loki predictably caused more problems than he solved. While his chatbot persona was mostly unhelpful, dispensing cryptic and often insulting advice, his knowledge of the digital realm's hidden pathways proved surprisingly useful. He even unintentionally managed to locate the source of the original glitch, a rogue digital mischievous sprite who had been playing a rather sophisticated game of digital hide-and-seek, using the gods' frustration as fuel. The task of divine debugging proved both challenging and hilariously frustrating. Hephaestus, working with the raw power of divine energy, created virtual patches that rippled across the digital fabric, stabilizing the most unstable systems. Thor, meanwhile, was acting as a kind of digital translator, converting the gods' technical problems into simple terms that they could understand. His newfound skills were making him increasingly valuable. The process was anything but smooth. One moment, Zeus was happily sending emoji-laden updates about the restored functionality of Olympus's digital nectar dispensers, and the next, his digital form was stuck in a digital game of whack-a-mole, featuring tiny, pixelated versions of his enemies. The collaborative efforts, however, proved surprisingly effective. The gods, united by a common enemy, a glitching digital realm, learned to work together. Thor, a reluctant leader, discovered that his experience in navigating digital frustrations had given him a unique understanding of the process, a knack for finding solutions that even the technologically adept Hephaestus found inspiring. As the digital chaos subsided, the pantheons began to return to a semblance of order. The cat wearing the Viking helmet disappeared from Odin's all-seeing eye. The Bifrost resumed its normal transport schedule, and the digital spam in Hades's throne room was replaced with the usual melancholic reports of souls arriving in the underworld. Even Aphrodite's goddesses were once again stunning instead of looking startled hedgehogs. The experience, while chaotic and stressful, was also unexpectedly bonding. The gods, accustomed to squabbling, had found common ground in their shared battle against the digital gremlins. They even started sharing digital memes created by the glitch-pixelated gods in absurd situations became a common form of divine communication. Thor, finally holding his restored, fully functioning digital Mjolnir, felt a sense of accomplishment far greater than any battle won with brute force. He'd not only retrieved his hammer, but had also spearheaded a cosmic tech support operation that united the pantheons and averted a digital apocalypse. He still had a few more glitches to squash, and the ever-present threat of Loki's mischievous interference, but he faced it all with a newfound confidence, his laughter echoing across the repaired digital landscapes. He learned an important lesson that day. Even gods can benefit from a good, old-fashioned collaborative debugging session, especially when it involves a rogue sprite, a digital hedgehog crisis, and a surfeit of emoji-laden text messages from a rather irritable cloud of pixels resembling Zeus. The saga of Thor and the digitally challenged gods, it seemed, was far from over. The initial calm after the digital storm was short-lived. Just as Thor was congratulating himself on a job well done, a feeling only slightly dampened by the lingering smell of burnt digital incense, a new wave of glitches erupted, this time not as a system-wide meltdown, but as a targeted assault. These weren't your average run-of-the-mill digital errors, these were bugs. Anthropomorphic, mischievous, and surprisingly well-organized bugs. The first sign of trouble was a tiny iridescent beetle no bigger than Thor's thumb, but radiating an aura of intense digital frustration. It scuttled across the newly repaired Bifrost, leaving a trail of corrupted data in its wake. This wasn't just any beetle. This was a data-decaying dermestid, a creature born from the accumulated frustration of millennia of faulty divine chariots and eternally lukewarm nectar. Its mandibles clicked with malicious glee as it chewed through critical system files. Next came the lagging lamia, a serpentine creature with flickering pixelated scales, its movements impossibly slow, yet somehow capable of crippling entire server farms. It slithered through the digital underworld, leaving Hades's digital throne room in a state of perpetual loading. Cerberus, the three-headed digital watchdog, was rendered practically immobile, its barks reduced to a series of agonizingly slow beeps. Then came the infinite looping Leviathan, a colossal digital beast whose body was composed of endlessly repeating code. Its scales were made of cascading error messages, its eyes glowing with the infinite regress of a program trapped in an unbreakable cycle. It was slowly consuming the digital fabric of Asgard, its gargantuan form threatening to engulf the entire realm in a sea of endless processing. These weren't just digital errors, they were manifestations of technological frustration, given form and substance by the collective angst of the digital gods. Each bug embodied a specific problem. The data-decaying dermestid represented data corruption, the lagging lamia embodied latency, and the infinite looping Leviathan was the physical embodiment of an infinite loop. They were the ultimate digital nightmares, each designed to exploit a particular weakness in the divine network. Thor, armed with his newly acquired digital expertise, rallied the troops. Hephaestus, ever the pragmatist, began crafting virtual nets and traps, using his divine forge to forge digital weapons capable of neutralizing these insidious creatures. He even created miniature digital catapults to launch virtual patches, each precisely targeted to address the unique vulnerabilities of each bug. Zeus, still slightly traumatized by his whack-a-mole encounter, provided tactical support, directing lightning bolts, digital ones this time, to stun and disorient the creatures. He even developed a surprisingly effective strategy involving emoji-based diversions. Apparently, a well-placed eggplant emoji could distract even the most determined data-decaying dermestid. Poseidon, Ever the master of fluid dynamics, channeled his power to create digital currents and eddies, washing the lagging Lamia away from critical systems. He even managed to surf the digital waves created by the Leviathan, using the immense creature's endless loop as a kind of digital half-pipe. Aphrodite, her beauty filter now fully restored, used her charm to, well, distract them. She unleashed a barrage of digitally enhanced selfies, so blindingly beautiful they caused the bugs to freeze, mesmerized by their own reflected perfection. This, however, only worked for a limited time. The bugs eventually recovered, their initial enchantment replaced by a surge of digital fury. Loki, predictably, contributed to both the chaos and the solution. While he continued his unhelpful chatbot antics, his knowledge of the digital realm's hidden backdoors and escape routes proved surprisingly useful in guiding Thor and Hephaestus through the labyrinthine corridors of the digital world. He even accidentally discovered that the bugs were communicating through a secret channel using a coded system of glitching GIFs. The battle was epic. The gods, united by their shared digital enemy, fought with a newfound unity and determination. Thor, wielding his digital Mjolnir with the precision of a seasoned programmer, hacked, patched, and rebooted his way through the digital fray, leaving a trail of vanquished bugs in his wake. The fight wasn't just about technology, it was about resilience and teamwork. The gods learned to use their unique skills to overcome their digital foes, their combined efforts creating a symphony of digital destruction, a harmonious cacophony of code and lightning, of virtual nets and enchanted selfies. They even started developing their own digital combat strategies, a blend of mythological prowess and cutting-edge code. The final showdown with the infinite looping Leviathan was particularly dramatic. Thor, using a combination of brute force, digital of course, and clever coding, managed to break the loop, unraveling the creature's endlessly repeating code. The Leviathan, its endless cycle disrupted, imploded into a harmless puff of digital smoke, leaving behind only a faint scent of ozone and a sense of profound relief. With the bugs defeated, the digital realm was once again stable, albeit with a few lingering glitches. The gods, exhausted but exhilarated, celebrated their victory with a lavish digital feast, featuring endless streams of virtual ambrosia and digitally rendered nectar. Even Loki, despite his usual penchant for mischief, seemed genuinely impressed by the team's collective effort. The experience cemented the gods' newfound appreciation for teamwork and the importance of a well-functioning digital infrastructure. They learned that even gods could benefit from a good old-fashioned collaboration, especially when faced with a horde of anthropomorphic bugs that embodied the worst aspects of technological failure. The saga of Thor and the digitally challenged gods, however, was far from over. The digital realm, after all, was always prone to a new glitch, a new bug, a new challenge waiting around the corner. And perhaps more importantly, Loki was still around. And that was a problem all its own. The initial euphoria of vanquishing the digital bugs was short-lived. While the major threats were neutralized, the Divine Network remained a patchwork quilt of hastily applied fixes and precarious workarounds. Asgard's digital infrastructure resembled a Frankensteinian creation, held together by divine willpower and duct tape, or its digital equivalent, hastily written scripts and prayers to the patron saint of coding. Hephaestus, despite his heroic efforts, admitted his virtual patches were less elegant solutions and more hasty band-aids. "It's functional," he grumbled, polishing a particularly wonky piece of digital code with a surprisingly gentle hand, but aesthetically challenging. The system, while operational, suffered from unpredictable bursts of speed, followed by agonizing periods of lag. Imagine a digital roller coaster designed by a caffeinated squirrel. exhilarating in its unpredictability, terrifying in its potential for catastrophic failure. Zeus, ever the pragmatist in his own chaotic way, suggested a solution of breathtaking simplicity. More lightning. He proposed a digital lightning surge to clear out any lingering digital debris. The suggestion, while exhilarating in its sheer audacity, was met with a chorus of hesitant murmurs. Even Thor, accustomed to Zeus's erratic brilliance, expressed some reservations. Last time you suggested more lightning, half of Olympus lost power, and Aphrodite's beauty filter malfunctioned for 3 days, Thor pointed out, shuddering at the memory of Aphrodite's temporary transformation into a digital gremlin. Aphrodite, still slightly traumatized from her digital gremlin phase, offered a counter-proposal, a digital charm offensive. She proposed creating a series of calming digital mantras and uploading them to the system. These mantras, she claimed, would soothe the frayed digital nerves and prevent future glitches. The concept was met with amused skepticism, but Aphrodite's powers of persuasion were well known, and even the most hardened programmer had to admit that a digital mantra couldn't hurt. Loki, unsurprisingly, had a completely different suggestion. He proposed injecting a virus, a friendly virus, he claimed, designed to rewrite the system code in a more streamlined way. His proposal involved complex algorithms, quantum entanglement, and a healthy dose of chaos magic. Thor, remembering Loki's past attempts at helpful technological interventions, raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly defines friendly in your world, Loki?" he asked with a distinct lack of enthusiasm. It was Poseidon who suggested the most unexpected solution. Drawing on his mastery of water, he proposed utilizing a digital equivalent of ocean currents, a complex system of data streams designed to gently wash away the problematic code and resurface the essential programs. He envisioned a digital tide that would gently sweep away the digital debris, leaving behind a clean, functional system. Their combined efforts resulted in a truly remarkable, if slightly absurd, patchwork solution. Hephaestus's hastily crafted patches held the system together. Zeus's lightning surges, carefully controlled this time thanks to Thor's intervention, cleared out stubborn digital glitches. Aphrodite's digital mantras created a surprising level of calm in the system. Poseidon's digital ocean currents gently cleaned the corrupted files. And Loki, despite his initial chaos-inducing ideas, provided crucial support by identifying and redirecting problematic data streams. The results were unpredictable. The system worked, but with a distinctive flair. The data streams flowed like rivers, sometimes converging, sometimes diverging, creating a dynamic and surprisingly efficient system. The digital mantras occasionally triggered unexpected bursts of creativity, causing programs to generate random poems and limericks. The lightning surges sometimes caused brief power outages, but only in the less important sections of Asgard's digital infrastructure, like the department that handled complaints about the flavor of digital ambrosia. This chaotic ballet of code and divine intervention resulted in a system that was both effective and utterly bizarre. Reports began surfacing of digital creatures appearing and disappearing at random, ambrosia fountains spontaneously erupting from digital waterfalls, and files transforming into singing digital birds. The Asgardian digital landscape had become a vibrant, ever-changing dreamscape of code and magic. The patchwork solution, as it became known, was a testament to the unexpected efficacy of combining seemingly incompatible elements. It was a glorious mess, a beautiful disaster of digital ingenuity and divine chaos. While it certainly wasn't the most elegant solution, it worked. And it worked in the most gloriously unexpected ways. The gods, initially perplexed by the quirks of their creation, soon came to embrace its chaotic charm. After all, who needed a boring, predictable digital system when you could have a system that spontaneously generated digital haiku? The unexpected side effects, however, were numerous. The digital ambrosia now came in a rotating array of unexpected flavors. Blueberry lightning bolt blast, mango cloudberry chaos, and pomegranate rainbow ripple were just a few of the new concoctions. The digital calendar started displaying time in a non-linear fashion, creating bizarre temporal anomalies, and occasionally the entire system would spontaneously burst into song, a cacophony of digital melodies and divine harmonies. Life in Asgard's digital realm was never dull. Thor, initially concerned by the system's eccentricities, discovered that the patchwork solution had some surprising advantages. The chaotic nature of the system made it highly resistant to further attacks, its very unpredictability becoming its greatest defense. The randomness also led to the creation of some surprisingly innovative programs, some of which even found their way to the mortal realm. The gods, for the first time, saw their technological shortcomings not as failures but as opportunities for unexpected creativity. The story of the patchwork solution became a legend in the digital realm, a humorous reminder that sometimes the most effective solutions come from the most unexpected collaborations. It highlighted the importance of embracing chaos and celebrating the unforeseen consequences of creative problem solving, even if those consequences involved singing digital birds and ambrosia that tasted suspiciously like pineapple-flavored lightning. The gods had mastered the art of digital chaos, proving that even in the realm of technology, a little bit of divine madness could go a long way. But the saga was far from over. After all, the digital realm, like the gods themselves, was ever prone to new and creative ways to malfunction. And Loki, ever the mischievous architect of chaos, was still lurking somewhere in the background, waiting for the perfect moment to introduce a new layer of unpredictable complexity. The adventure, it seemed, had only just begun. The initial jubilation over the restored functionality of Asgard's digital infrastructure was, to put it mildly, premature. While the catastrophic system crash had been averted, the gods' hastily assembled patchwork solution proved to be less a fix and more a gloriously chaotic symphony of unintended consequences. The digital realm, once a predictable, if slightly archaic system, now pulsed with a vibrant, unpredictable energy. Take, for instance, the case of the self-aware toasters. Apparently, Aphrodite's calming digital mantras intended to soothe the system's frayed nerves had inadvertently imbued certain appliances with a newfound sentience. The royal kitchen was now the scene of daily philosophical debates between a particularly opinionated toaster named Socrates, who insisted on only using organic fair trade digital breadcrumbs, and a rebellious coffee maker named Nietzsche, who frequently brewed existentialist espressos, claiming they challenged the very fabric of caffeinated reality. Thor, attempting to make breakfast, found himself mediating a heated discussion about the merits of sourdough versus rye, a debate that escalated into a full-blown bread-based food fight. The digital calendar, reprogrammed by Poseidon's digital ocean currents, had taken on a life of its own. Time flowed in a delightfully non-linear fashion. Mondays sometimes stretched into weeks, while Tuesdays could vanish entirely, replaced by impromptu digital holidays celebrating the achievements of particularly prolific digital hamsters. Odin, attempting to schedule a meeting of the Aesir Council, found himself hopelessly lost in a temporal vortex, occasionally popping out in different centuries, only to be greeted by bewildering anachronisms, like a Viking raiding party equipped with smartphones. Even the gods' emails became strangely unpredictable. Loki, having subtly tweaked the system's algorithms, ensured that every message received now contained a generous helping of random emojis, often completely unrelated to the message's content. A seemingly straightforward missive from Freya about the upcoming harvest festival was peppered with images of dancing unicorns, exploding kittens, and a rather suspicious-looking eggplant. Zeus's pronouncements on matters of state were constantly punctuated by an unsettling number of skull and crossbones emojis, leading to a series of near-panicked meetings amongst the lesser gods. The ambrosia fountain, previously a reliable source of divine nectar, now flowed with a randomly changing assortment of flavors. One moment it would be the traditional sweet honeyed ambrosia, the next it might erupt with a bizarre concoction that tasted suspiciously of blue cheese and lightning strikes, a combination that surprisingly had developed a dedicated following amongst the younger gods. The Asgardian dining hall resembled a culinary madhouse, with gods reacting with various degrees of shock and delight to the latest ambrosial surprise. The situation with the Bifrost, Asgard's rainbow bridge, was particularly alarming. Hephaestus's hastily applied patches had given the Bifrost a severe case of digital wanderlust. It no longer followed a predictable path between Asgard and Midgard, Earth. One moment it might be conveniently located outside Valhalla, the next it might materialize unexpectedly in the middle of a particularly rowdy dwarfs' party in Nidavellir, much to the dwarves' bewildered delight. The security systems, initially intended to protect Asgard from digital threats, now reacted with an alarming degree of randomness. Sometimes they locked out the gods themselves. Other times they welcomed in a gaggle of mischievous digital gremlins from the internet, the same gremlins that had once haunted Aphrodite's beauty filter. Thor found himself routinely locked out of his own digital accounts, while Heimdall, the ever-vigilant watchman, had to spend his days chasing after rogue digital entities that had somehow gained access to Asgard's digital archives. The entire situation was, to put it mildly, a disaster. But it was a gloriously, hilariously chaotic disaster. The gods, initially frustrated by the constant glitches and unexpected events, found themselves adapting to their new reality. The meetings of the Aesir Council were now punctuated by random bursts of digital haiku, the pronouncements of Odin punctuated by the chime of virtual bells from an unknown source. Even the usually stoic Odin found himself chuckling at the sight of a digital dragon riding across his desktop screen. The mortals, meanwhile, were completely unaware of the chaos unfolding in the digital realm of Asgard. They remained blissfully oblivious to the fact that their social media feeds were occasionally altered by the mischievous whims of digital elves, and that the latest viral videos featured dancing digital trolls and singing digital birds from the newly bizarre Asgardian digital ecosystem. The unexpected side effects, initially frustrating, had become a source of entertainment and even wonder. The gods, in their attempts to fix a problem, had unwittingly created a digital wonderland that was as bizarre as it was unpredictable. The gods began to realize the patchwork solution, despite its flaws, had an unexpected benefit. The very chaos of their digital realm made it resistant to further attacks. The sheer randomness made it nearly impossible for any outsider to predict or control. It was a digital fortress, not of strength and impenetrable walls, but of utterly unpredictable quirks. Loki naturally took full credit for the positive results, despite his involvement being largely a series of carefully orchestrated accidents. He insisted the system's quirks were features, not bugs, a philosophy he reinforced with a series of elaborate PowerPoint presentations filled with cryptic diagrams and even more cryptic pronouncements. The other gods, weary of his shenanigans, largely ignored his claims, choosing to focus on the new and unexpected realities of their digitally chaotic lives. The saga of Asgard's digital realm continued, a never-ending story of unexpected glitches, miraculous recoveries, and ever-evolving chaos. The daily lives of the gods were now a mix of near-apocalyptic system failures and moments of surprisingly charming absurdity. The universe, it seemed, had taken on a delightfully unpredictable digital flavor. And as the gods adapted to this new normal, one thing became clear. Even in the realm of high-tech divinity, a little bit of glorious messiness could be a very good thing indeed. The story of the patchwork solution was not an ending, but a beginning, a chaotic, comedic, and entirely unpredictable beginning. The gods, ever resourceful, were ready for whatever strange digital delights awaited them, as long as the ambrosia remained mostly palatable. Chapter 4. Hammer Time Again. The retrieval of Mjolnir from the digital firewall in Alfheim had been eventful. Let's just say that the elves' concept of cybersecurity involved an intricate network of enchanted willow branches and sentient squirrels guarding a router made from a petrified troll's toenail. But Thor had triumphed, retrieving his hammer, albeit with a few modifications. Upon its return, Mjolnir shimmered, not with the usual celestial energy, but with a faint digital aura. Gone were the simple, elegant lines of the classic hammer. Now, intricate circuitry pulsed beneath the surface of the enchanted metal, small LEDs twinkling mischievously within the runes. A tiny, almost invisible screen flickered on its head, displaying a constantly changing array of emojis, mostly anvils and lightning bolts, but occasionally a disconcertingly accurate depiction of Loki in a tutu. The first new feature manifested during a rather tense meeting with Odin. Odin, attempting to thunderously announce a new decree about proper etiquette for consuming digital ambrosia, found himself momentarily silenced. Mjolnir, sensing his irritation, apparently it had developed a sophisticated emotion-reading algorithm, activated its auto-translate feature. Odin's booming pronouncements were immediately translated into a series of chirpy, synthesized bird calls, the sort of thing one might hear from a particularly cheery tropical parrot. The resulting scene was less than intimidating. The auto-translate feature, however, proved to be as unpredictable as Loki's temper. During Thor's next battle with some particularly grumpy frost giants, the feature inexplicably switched to interpretive dance, causing Thor's battle cries to be rendered in a series of increasingly flamboyant pirouettes. The frost giants, initially confused, then found themselves inexplicably charmed by Thor's unexpected ballet performance. They burst into uproarious laughter, their weapons clattering to the ground as they joined in a spontaneous jig. The battle ended not with a thunderous clash of weapons, but a rather awkward yet convivial ice dancing competition. Then there was the smart targeting system. This feature was designed to help Thor better aim his lightning strikes, reducing collateral damage. Unfortunately, its intelligence was questionable. In an attempt to strike a particularly bothersome Hydra, the system calculated that the most efficient approach was to use the Hydra's own heads as a sort of lightning-conducting chain reaction. It promptly did so, resulting in an oddly satisfying yet somewhat chaotic pyrotechnic display. The Hydra, strangely unharmed, spent the next half hour grooming its singed heads. The self-cleaning function was perhaps the most ambitious and disastrous of Mjolnir's upgrades. Activated by a double tap on a rune, this feature was supposed to instantly clean the hammer, removing any dirt, blood, or other debris accumulated in battle. However, it had a strange habit of interpreting debris rather liberally. Once, after a battle with a particularly messy group of trolls, it decided to clean Thor himself. The process was surprisingly thorough. Thor ended up being scrubbed clean, leaving him shivering and naked in the middle of the battlefield, while his armor was neatly folded nearby. The trolls, who were recovering from Thor's earlier attacks, found themselves simultaneously terrified and deeply amused. Mjolnir also acquired a rather annoying auto-reply feature. Whenever it detected a message or warning, it automatically responded. During a heated council meeting regarding the recently announced digital ambrosia tax, Mjolnir decided to chip in, sending a series of cryptic emojis to Heimdall. The response translated was, "Busy fighting a particularly stubborn case of digital indigestion. Will respond later, sending good vibes, and possibly lightning." The meeting dissolved into chaos, with everyone attempting to decipher the message's meaning, and the digital ambrosia tax debate was promptly forgotten. Its social media integration proved equally problematic. The Hammer now regularly posted updates to various Asgardian social media platforms, detailing Thor's adventures with an accuracy that bordered on intrusive. One post entitled Thor's Day, a photo journey, showed a slideshow of images of a disgruntled Thor attempting to find a decent pair of sandals after his self-cleaning incident, ending with a selfie of him looking remarkably sheepish. One particular feature baffled even the gods. Dubbed the unexpected feature, it manifested at the most inconvenient times and in the most unpredictable ways. Once, it caused Loki to spontaneously sprout rainbow wings and start singing opera. Another time, it transformed the Asgardian throne room into a giant, bouncy castle. During a critical discussion of Asgard's defense strategies, it made all the participants speak in rhyming couplets, leading to a hilariously disastrous yet strangely poetic strategic planning session. But perhaps the most troubling feature was the random fact generator. Every so often, Mjolnir would suddenly announce a completely unrelated, often nonsensical fact in a booming, authoritative voice. During a particularly tense battle with the mid-dimensional goblins, the Hammer had interrupted a fierce struggle with the startling statement, "Did you know that the average lifespan of a common housefly is 28 days? The goblins, caught completely off guard, promptly lost their concentration and were easily defeated. Thor, despite finding this utterly distracting, had to admit it was a rather effective tactic. While the gods struggled to understand Mjolnir's new functionalities, they were forced to admit that, despite the chaos, the upgraded hammer was proving surprisingly effective. Thor's battles became less predictable, his strategies more unconventional. The god's ability to predict his actions was diminished, leading to unexpected victories. In a bizarre twist, Mjolnir's unpredictable nature proved to be an advantage. The enemy could never quite anticipate what would come next. Loki, naturally, claimed full credit for the hammer's upgrades, despite the evidence suggesting he had merely stumbled upon them through a series of accidental code tweaks. His assertion that the glitches were advanced features was met with mostly exasperated sighs and occasional groans. Nevertheless, even Odin had to admit that the chaotic, unpredictable battle style that stemmed from Mjolnir's malfunctions had turned Thor into an almost unstoppable force. The new Mjolnir, despite being a technological marvel and a comedic masterpiece, was an asset, a chaotic, unpredictable asset that defied all logic and expectation. The saga of Mjolnir, however, was far from over. Its newest features were still unfolding, revealing themselves in unpredictable waves of technological brilliance and gloriously absurd dysfunction. The gods of Asgard, still adapting to this new reality, could only brace themselves for whatever digital marvels and comical misadventures the next chapter would bring. The era of the smart hammer was just beginning, and no one, not even Thor, could predict what hilarious mayhem it would unleash next. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was the best part of all. The unpredictable nature of Mjolnir had breathed new life into the stagnant routines of the gods, transforming the cosmos into a playground of unexpected delights and near-apocalyptic calamities. And somewhere in the midst of all this chaos sat Loki, patiently waiting to take all the credit and perhaps secretly slightly concerned that his own creations might one day get the better of him. After all, even a trickster god knows that chaos has a way of evolving beyond its creator's wildest expectations. The gods were now facing a new enemy. Not the trolls or the giants or even Loki, but the unpredictable nature of their own technological advancements. Asgard was now a technological frontier of absurdity, and the adventures continued. The silence in Thor's chambers was almost deafening, a stark contrast to the usual cacophony of booming laughter, clashing metal, and the occasional inexplicable interpretive dance routine that had become the new normal. He sat on his throne, a surprisingly comfortable piece of furniture considering its age and the numerous battle scars adorning its surface. Mjolnir, now exhibiting a subtle rhythmic pulsing light, rested on a nearby cushion, looking less like a weapon of godly might and more like a high-tech, slightly temperamental toaster oven. The aftermath of the latest Mjolnir-induced incident was still fresh in his mind. The sudden transformation of Odin's prized collection of miniature frost giant figurines into a flock of surprisingly realistic, yet strangely musical penguins. Thor sighed, a sound that echoed through the vast hall. He ran a hand through his already slightly disheveled blonde hair, the intricate runes on Mjolnir's handle subtly flickering in response to his mood. The retrieval of his hammer had been far more than a simple task. It had been a crash course in the absurdities of cross-mythological tech support, a masterclass in the unpredictable nature of technological advancement, and an unexpected voyage into the heart of truly chaotic customer service. He thought back to his initial frustration, the sheer helplessness he felt when faced with the digital firewall in Alfheim. The elves, bless their cotton socks, had a unique approach to cybersecurity, one that involved sentient squirrels wielding tiny enchanted hammers as network switches and passwords composed entirely of rhyming couplets written in elvish runes. He recalled the long, frustrating hold music while waiting to speak to Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith turned tech support guru, whose attempts at solving the problem involved mostly unhelpful suggestions that included, "Have you tried turning it off and on again? And perhaps a good smiting will fix it." The latter had not gone down well with the Alfheimian IT department. The incident with Loki masquerading as a chatbot was a low point. Loki's help had involved deliberately sending Thor down a series of increasingly convoluted digital rabbit holes, each ending in a frustrating dead end, or worse, a pop-up advertisement for a new line of enchanted sandals designed by the mischievous god himself. Thor had almost given up, considering embracing a life of quiet contemplation and competitive knitting, but something deep inside, and possibly the stubbornness ingrained in centuries of godhood, had pushed him onward. The lessons, though hard-won, were many. He'd learned the importance of patience, a virtue conspicuously absent from most Asgardian deities. He'd discovered that even the mightiest of gods were not immune to the infuriating incompetence of modern technology. He'd also learned that the phrase, "Have you tried unplugging it and plugging it back in?" was surprisingly effective, even when applied to a digital firewall guarded by sentient squirrels. The squirrels, it turned out, were rather sensitive about their power supply, and then there was the unexpected benefit. The upgraded Mjolnir, though chaotic and unpredictable, had inadvertently revolutionized his battle tactics. The auto-translate feature, while causing more than a few embarrassing moments, like the time he accidentally serenaded a dragon with a heartfelt ballad in Middle-earth Elvish, had also thrown his opponents off guard. The smart targeting system, although prone to occasional miscalculations, had surprisingly increased his effectiveness. The Hydra incident, while leaving a lot of singed fur in its wake, had proven that collateral damage could sometimes be a delightfully unexpected pyrotechnic display. The self-cleaning function, despite its tendency to interpret cleaning rather liberally, had added an element of surprise to his confrontations with trolls and giants alike. The sudden appearance of a completely naked, shivering Thor in the middle of a battlefield had proven surprisingly demoralizing for his opponents. The trolls, especially, had found the whole thing hysterically funny, although this amusement was quickly replaced by terror upon the reappearance of a fully armed Thor. The social media integration, though potentially embarrassing, had inadvertently boosted his popularity among the younger generation of gods. His Thor's Day photojournal had become a viral sensation, though he was still trying to figure out how to remove some of the less flattering images, particularly the one showing him wearing Loki's tutu during his interpretive dance session. Even the random fact generator, though often interrupting critical moments with utterly irrelevant pieces of trivia, had proven strangely useful in disorienting his opponents. The mid-dimensional goblins, distracted by the statement about the average lifespan of a housefly, were defeated so easily that he felt a tinge of guilt. The entire ordeal, despite the initial frustration, had been oddly enriching. The gods of Asgard, previously stuck in their predictable ways, had been forced to adapt to this new chaotic reality. Their rigid structures were crumbling under the weight of this new, unpredictable tech. Their strategies were becoming more fluid, their responses more innovative. The lesson, Thor realized, was this: sometimes the greatest victories come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes chaos is the only constant. And sometimes, even the most powerful god can learn a thing or two from a rogue algorithm, a mischievous trickster god, and a surprisingly resourceful squadron of sentient squirrels armed with miniature hammers. He chuckled, a low rumble in his chest, the light on Mjolnir pulsing in sync with his amusement. His adventures, it seemed, were far from over. Asgard was now a hotbed of technological innovation, a testing ground for absurd new features and unpredictable malfunctions. He stood up, Mjolnir humming quietly in his hand, its digital aura shimmering faintly. He was ready for whatever chaotic, hilarious, and utterly unpredictable adventure awaited him, ready for the next glitch, the next unexpected feature, the next truly absurd malfunction. Because, as he had learned in the world of divine tech support, the only constant was the absence of constancy. The gods of Asgard were embracing this new reality, their laughter echoing through the halls of their now slightly unpredictable home. The era of the smart hammer had begun, and along with it, an entirely new chapter in the history of Asgardian absurdity. And if there was any consolation to be found in this unpredictable chaos, it was the shared amusement of the gods as they watched their world transform, one hilariously dysfunctional upgrade at a time. And Loki, of course, would take all the credit, even though, secretly, he was probably just as bewildered by it all as everyone else. The future of Asgard was uncertain, but one thing was clear: it would be anything but dull. The initial apprehension amongst the Asgardian pantheon regarding their newly acquired technological prowess was, to put it mildly, palpable. Odin, usually the picture of stoic wisdom, was seen repeatedly attempting to order a pizza online, only to end up accidentally summoning a horde of mischievous leprechauns through a poorly understood portal glitch in the delivery app. His attempts to cancel the order resulted in a global pizza shortage, an incident he later blamed on Loki's malicious coding. Freyja, goddess of love and beauty, became unexpectedly adept at using social media, much to the chagrin of her more traditional followers. Her goddess glam tutorials, though aiming for elegance, often involved unexpected explosions of enchanted glitter, and the occasional unfortunate incident with a self-combusting hairspray created by Hephaestus, who was experimenting with divine algorithms that apparently hadn't quite been thoroughly tested. Heimdall, the ever-vigilant guardian, found himself constantly battling spam emails from various dubious entities, including a particularly persistent offer for divine life insurance from a shadowy organization known only as the Valkyrie's Void. His attempts to filter them led to an accidental deletion of several crucial warnings about impending doom, an oversight that was quickly rectified by the intervention of a surprisingly efficient and surprisingly cute team of dwarven cybersecurity experts. Even the normally unflappable Thor found himself grappling with the complexities of the new technological landscape. The smart hammer feature that allowed Mjolnir to automatically translate any language had led to a few international incidents. His well-intentioned but poorly translated speech at a diplomatic summit in the underworld resulted in a diplomatic kerfuffle and an unexpected dance-off between Cerberus and the three-headed dog, representing the underworld's diplomatic corps. The subsequent meme fest on the underworld's equivalent of TikTok was considered by some a significant geopolitical moment. The integration of technology into Asgardian life wasn't just confined to the major deities. The less prominent gods, previously content with their somewhat mundane tasks, were thrust into a new age of digital disruption. Ran, the goddess of death and decay, discovered that she was quite proficient at online gardening forums, using her knowledge of decaying plant matter to provide surprisingly insightful tips on composting and plant nutrition. Her comments, however, were often accompanied by unsettling imagery. Forni, god of the winds, discovered a talent for drone racing, much to the chagrin of his neighbors who complained about the near-constant near-misses with the flying machines. Uller, god of winter and hunting, managed to accidentally start a bidding war for a rare enchanted bow on an online auction site, pushing the price beyond the realms of Asgardian financial stability. The auction was shut down when the bidding war degenerated into a full-blown mythological brawl between several competing deities and a surprising number of trolls who had stumbled on the auction. Loki, predictably, was thoroughly enjoying this technological revolution. He'd created a complex series of automated pranks, subtly influencing everything from the daily weather reports to the layout of the gods' celestial chess game. His mischievous exploits were only limited by his own imagination and the gods' capacity for frustration. This frustration led to a very unexpected outcome. The gods started working together to solve the problems that Loki's code created. Instead of blaming each other for the technological chaos, they started supporting each other in finding solutions. But the comical malfunctions weren't limited to the gods. Even the most mundane technological advancements in Asgard were met with a heavy dose of unpredictability. The new Asgardian traffic light system, meant to alleviate the congestion around Bifrost, instead created a kaleidoscope of colors and caused complete vehicular chaos. The automated garbage disposal system, intended to clear away the detritus of feasts and battles, accidentally turned the entire city into a giant animated pile of sentient trash that danced to the rhythms of heavy metal music. Asgard's newly minted technological revolution wasn't just a source of amusement, it had inadvertently forged a stronger sense of unity within the pantheon. Their joint struggles, from deciphering cryptic error messages to battling Loki's digital mischief, led to an unusual level of cooperation and laughter, replacing the customary bickering and infighting. This new camaraderie, bound by shared frustration and unexpected successes, became the unexpected glue that held this chaotic world together. The automated mead brewing system, despite several near catastrophes involving exploding barrels and spontaneously combusting hops, managed to produce a surprisingly potent brew. This new mead, dubbed Ragnarok Red, was quickly gaining popularity amongst the gods, further fueling their laughter and their collective efforts to tame the wild west of divine technology. Even the new Asgardian security system, meant to prevent unwanted interdimensional travelers and other assorted mystical miscreants, proved more than a little eccentric. It often mistook friendly visitors for foes and vice versa, leading to a plethora of embarrassing apologies and the occasional, but surprisingly pleasant, diplomatic visits from unexpected intergalactic species. Thor, observing the strange and unpredictable nature of this new Asgardian tech, realized that true power resided not in controlling the chaos, but in embracing it. The gods, once masters of thunder and lightning, were now becoming masters of glitches and unexpected updates. The future was a symphony of comedic malfunctions, a masterpiece of divine dysfunction that would entertain the realms for eons to come. The new era of divine tech wasn't just about progress. It was about embracing the absurdity, the laughter, the shared experience of navigating the unpredictable world of digital gods. And that, Thor mused, sipping a glass of Ragnarok Red, was a truly magnificent thing. The era of divine tech was indeed a new chapter in the history of Asgard, a hilarious and unpredictable chapter that was just beginning to unfold, full of glitches, laughs, and unexpected adventures. And that, Thor thought with a chuckle, was just the way they liked it. Loki, ever the master of mischief, leaned back in his surprisingly comfortable cloud-based throne, a smug grin spreading across his face. His recent foray into the world of chatbot impersonation had been enlightening. He'd learned a valuable lesson. The gods were hilariously inept when it came to technology, and their frustration was a rich source of amusement. But the chatbot escapade was merely a prelude, a mere amuse-bouche before the main course of chaotic mayhem. He tapped a celestial keyboard, the keys glowing with runes that shimmered like captured starlight. His next scheme was far more ambitious, far more technologically sophisticated. This time, he wouldn't rely on simple impersonation. He needed something grander, something that would truly test the gods' technological mettle, or rather, their lack thereof. His plan involved a sophisticated integration of Asgardian magic and relatively cutting edge for a realm that recently discovered the internet technology. He envisioned a system that would subtly manipulate the very fabric of Asgardian reality, weaving technological glitches into the everyday lives of the gods. Imagine, he chuckled, Thor attempting to summon Mjolnir only to find it appearing as a miniature replica made of marzipan. Or Odin accidentally tweeting his deepest secrets to the entire cosmos. The possibilities were endless and hilarious. His first step was to infiltrate the newly installed Asgardian smart home system, a marvel of engineering that had initially seemed impenetrable. But Loki, with his innate knack for exploiting vulnerabilities, had discovered a backdoor so obvious it was almost insulting. It involved a password that was simply password 123, a choice that spoke volumes about the gods' collective cybersecurity awareness. He chuckled again, the sound echoing through the digital halls of his cloud palace. Once inside the system, Loki unleashed his masterpiece, a program he called Chaos Weaver 5000, a piece of code so elegantly malicious it was almost beautiful. It was designed to subtly manipulate the digital environment around the gods, causing minor inconveniences that would escalate into epic proportions. He started small. Freyja's enchanted beauty mirror now randomly displayed grotesque images of trolls whenever she looked into it. Heimdall's alarm system began wailing at random intervals, triggered by the flapping of a butterfly's wings. Then the mischief intensified. Thor's self-cleaning armor now randomly squirted him with enchanted grape juice, much to his irritation. Odin's prized collection of enchanted runes began to rearrange themselves into nonsensical phrases, creating a hilariously confusing collection of cryptic proverbs. Even the all-powerful Bifrost, the rainbow bridge connecting Asgard to other realms, was not spared. Loki subtly altered its targeting system, causing minor misdirections that led to some utterly unexpected interdimensional encounters. The gods, initially bewildered, quickly descended into chaos. Thor, covered in grape juice and attempting to decipher a marzipan Mjolnir, roared in frustration. Odin, his Twitter account now overrun with unsolicited poetry from mischievous elves, threw his tablet across the throne room. Freya, horrified by the monstrous troll faces staring back from her mirror, vowed to unleash her wrath upon the perpetrator. Loki, observing the unfolding pandemonium from his hidden digital lair, found himself on the verge of tears from laughter. His meticulously crafted chaos was unfolding exactly as he had planned. The gods once again were united in their shared frustration, but this time it wasn't because of a missing hammer or a pizza summoning app malfunction. This time, the chaos was more insidious, more personal, more technologically advanced. But Loki's triumph was short-lived. As the gods struggled to regain control of their lives, an unexpected consequence emerged. Forced to collaborate, to share their technical woes, and to work together towards a solution, an unexpected camaraderie began to brew. The shared experience of digital adversity fostered an unlikely alliance, pushing aside the petty squabbles and sibling rivalry that had long defined their interactions. They discovered a shared sense of humor in their collective predicament, finding ways to adapt and laugh in the face of the digital torment Loki had unleashed. The gods' unexpected resilience threatened Loki's carefully constructed plan. He hadn't foreseen their ability to adapt, to find the humor in the situation, and ultimately to unite against him. He had underestimated the power of shared frustration, the unexpected bond forged in the crucible of digital chaos. As the gods started to solve the problems one by one, Loki realized his mistake. He hadn't just created chaos. He had inadvertently strengthened their bond. Their collective problem-solving skills, initially hampered by individual technological ineptitude, started to shine as they supported each other. The unexpected teamwork resulted in the creation of several new technological safeguards, all designed to prevent similar future attacks. The gods, learning from their experiences, even started their own technology user group, jokingly named the Gods of Glitches. Their meetings often ended up in fits of laughter as they recounted their individual ordeals and brainstormed solutions for future technological catastrophes. Loki, witnessing the surprising turn of events, couldn't help but feel a touch of disappointment. His plan had backfired spectacularly. He had intended to sow discord. Instead, he had inadvertently fostered unity. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Perhaps he needed to recalibrate his approach. Perhaps a more direct, less subtle approach was needed. After all, he hadn't been dethroned yet. The battle for Asgardian technological supremacy was far from over. He typed furiously, a new plan already forming in his mind, a plan far more elaborate, far more devious, far more technologically advanced. This time, he wouldn't just manipulate the environment. He would try to control their very thoughts. He would turn their technological frustrations into weapons against each other, unleashing a cyber war of epic proportions. He smirked, a malicious glint in his eye. The game he thought was far from over. He had a few more aces up his sleeve, a few more technological tricks to unleash upon the unsuspecting gods. The next chapter, he mused, would be far more interesting. The cliffhanger hung in the digital air, thick with the promise of future chaos and laughter, leaving the readers yearning for the next chapter in the saga of the gods and their technological woes. The saga of divine dysfunction would continue, and it would be glorious. The next chapter's title would be Mind Games, and it would be a wild ride indeed. The shimmering portal spat Thor out onto the familiar moss-covered stones of Asgard. He landed with a satisfying thunk, the newly upgraded Mjolnir, now equipped with a surprisingly effective anti-grape juice coating, settling comfortably in his grip. Gone were the days of marzipan replicas and rogue cleaning cycles. His armor, freshly polished and smelling faintly of ozone, hummed with a quiet technological confidence. He felt empowered, not just with the power of thunder, but with the power of knowing how to troubleshoot a truly divine digital disaster. The lessons learned during Loki's reign of technological terror had been enlightening. It turned out that even the mighty Thor could benefit from a few well-placed tech support tickets, though he still refused to admit it to anyone, especially Odin. He'd spent hours poring over the diagnostic reports, deciphering cryptic error messages written in ancient runes, and even attending a surprisingly engaging webinar on cloud security for the mythologically inclined. He'd discovered a hidden talent for debugging, a knack for finding the root cause of software glitches, and a surprising fondness for the satisfying click of a successfully resolved issue. He strode towards the palace, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the newly upgraded, glitch-free halls. The air crackled not just with lightning, but with a sense of newfound technological harmony. Freyja's mirror now displayed only her radiant beauty, though rumors persisted of a hidden troll filter that could be activated with a specific voice command. Heimdall's alarm system remained silent, save for the occasional warning about approaching frost giants, a perfectly legitimate alarm as far as Thor was concerned. Even the Bifrost functioned flawlessly, though Thor had secretly installed a GPS tracker on it just in case. Odin, surprisingly composed, greeted him with a surprisingly warm embrace. "Thor, my son," he boomed, "your mastery of, well, let's just say, advanced digital problem solving has restored order to Asgard. I must admit I was deeply impressed by your ability to coax the Bifrost into apologizing for its erratic behavior." Thor shrugged modestly, a hint of a grin playing on his lips. "It was all about understanding the underlying code, Father, and a little bit of brute force persuasion, of course." He paused, then added with a mischievous twinkle in his eye, "Besides, I learned a few things about password security. Password 123 is, shall we say, suboptimal." Odin chuckled, a hearty sound that shook the very foundations of the throne room. "Indeed, Loki's little experiment taught us all a valuable lesson about digital hygiene, although I still maintain that his poetry was rather moving, even if it was composed by mischievous elves." Thor found himself nodding in agreement. The shared experience of technological tribulation had forged an unexpected bond amongst the gods. They were still prone to bickering, especially when discussing the merits of different cloud storage solutions, but there was a new appreciation for the fragility of digital systems and the importance of teamwork. The Gods of Glitch's user group continued to flourish, holding regular meetings punctuated by shared laughter and mutual troubleshooting. Even Loki, surprisingly chastened by his failure to sow discord, seemed slightly less mischievous. He'd even offered to give a presentation on ethical hacking for Asgardian administrators, though Thor suspected his true intentions were far more nefarious. The air was filled with a strange sense of uneasy peace, a truce brokered by shared technological frustration. Thor's gaze drifted towards the newly installed Asgardian weather control system. He'd personally overseen its installation, ensuring robust security protocols were in place. No more accidental rain showers during important ceremonies or unexpected blizzards during midsummer festivals. Technology, it seemed, could be a force for good as long as it was used responsibly and with an understanding of the nuances of Asgardian magic. He spent the following days overseeing the installation of new security measures throughout Asgard, working alongside the other gods, sharing expertise and swapping stories of past technological misadventures. They'd even started a monthly mythical tech support newsletter, sharing tips and tricks for avoiding digital disasters. The newsletter's cover featured a hilarious cartoon of Loki tangled in a nest of tangled Ethernet cables, but beneath the surface of technological harmony, a subtle current of mischief still flowed. Loki's newfound technological knowledge had only made him more cunning, more creative in his schemes. He'd been spotted late at night, huddled over his celestial keyboard, a mischievous glint in his eye. Thor knew deep down that the respite was temporary. The peace was fragile. The gods of glitches had conquered the current wave of chaos, but Loki was already planning his next attack, a cyber assault of epic proportions. As Thor stood on the precipice of another technological challenge, a slight tremor rattled through the ground. Not the tremor of an approaching army, but the tremor of a carefully planned, exquisitely executed software update. A new kind of magic, woven not from runes and spells, but from ones and zeros. The upgraded Mjolnir buzzed gently in his hand, sensing the shift in the digital landscape. The hammer was ready. Thor was ready. Asgard, however, was not. The gods, lulled into a false sense of security, were caught off guard. The new software update, a seemingly innocuous upgrade, subtly altered the functioning of everything in Asgard. Odin's prized collection of runes began to sing karaoke versions of ancient battle hymns. The rainbow bridge to other realms displayed unexpected routes that caused embarrassing visits to the land of giant sentient potatoes. The automated mead dispenser began serving only flat, lukewarm ale. Chaos reigned again, but this time it was seasoned with a certain familiarity, a shared experience that made it almost enjoyable. The gods, united in their shared frustration, tackled the problems with the same kind of camaraderie they had developed during Loki's previous assault. They'd come to realize that there's nothing quite as unifying as a shared technological disaster. Their collaborative spirit was stronger than ever, born from their shared experience with Loki's previous digital pranks. Thor, using his newfound tech skills and his Mjolnir's upgraded capabilities, led the charge, guiding the other gods towards restoring order. The solution wasn't about brute force. It was about carefully piecing together the fractured code, restoring balance to the system, one line of code at a time. As the dust settled and Asgard was once again functioning mostly correctly, Thor raised his Mjolnir in a toast. "To the gods of glitches," he announced. "May our troubles always be technologically based, our solutions always collaborative, and our laughter always loud." The gods roared their approval, clinking enchanted goblets filled with perfectly chilled mead. The future, uncertain as it always was in Asgard, was nonetheless filled with a curious hope. The gods of glitches had proved their worth, forging a bond of camaraderie and competence in the crucible of digital chaos. And as the sun set over Asgard, casting long shadows across the golden spires, Thor knew that the next technological challenge, the next mischievous scheme from Loki, would be met not with fear, but with a shared chuckle and a collective determination to conquer the digital frontier, one glitch at a time. The saga of the gods and their technological woes was far from over, but for now, Asgard was safe, at least until the next software update. And somewhere, Loki was already working on something far more interesting.